Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D in WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of WhatIf Deku had 3 days to prove he isn't a villain. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. 1 hour until the exam begins. The sounds of message notifications interrupted the meeting the hero team was holding. Katsuki scowled and pulled his phone from his pocket, seeing a simple message pop up, a live streaming link sent to his phone from. Who the hell was this? He paused and tapped the link, throwing the feed to one of the screens in the room, drawing the attention of his classmates. The screen was covered in glitched-out static that slowly faded to black on red, a shape coalescing in the darkness. Soon the shape, which many of them recognized as Midoriya Izuku, came into focus, though the details were still cast in deep shadows. He was wearing some sort of hat with 2 feathery shapes that looked similar to the bunny ears of his hero costume sticking off the side. "Hello, heroes," came a low drawl, one that shocked most of Class 1 with its change from the usual nervous stuttering they were used to hearing. It was scratchy, almost dry-sounding. But more important was the tone. It was cold, threatening in a way they had never heard from the ball of green sunshine they knew and loved. "I know that you think you are prepared for me, that you think you are ready to fight me and my team." Ada, Kirishima, and Uraraka all glanced back to see a scowling Katsuki, eyes narrowed and focused, with Todoroki at his side. "By all means, come for me. Hunt me. Show me what you're made of." The silhouette leaned forwards, revealing that Midoriya wore a form-fitting face mask cast in the shape of a jester's smile. "Oh, and Kaken, or should I say Paragon?" Midoriya chuckled, voice childish and innocent. "I hope you're ready. This test is going to be explosive." The feed cut out, and the rest of the hero team turned to look at Katsuki. He had 24 heroes from both Class 1 and 1B who had spent the last 5 days figuring out tactics and working on getting in sync. He had the heavy hitters of the school, the strongest, the best, and he would prove it. "Everyone go get suited up. Get ready," he called. "We'll crush them as soon as we get the go-ahead." 7 days before the exam, Classes 1 and 1B were gathered in the auditorium, mumbling and whispered questions flying back and forth. They stood in huddled groups, glancing up at the empty stage. The question on everyone's lips was about what they were there for. Was it about the recent capture of the hero killer? About the results of their internships? No one knew. Less than 2 weeks ago they had been under internships. But now, without any warning, they were gathered. Soon enough, the sound of a whining microphone sent winces through the crowd. They looked up, seeing the small form of Principal Nedzu stand before the students on the podium. For most of the students it only added to their confusion, but the few students who had reason to interact with the principal felt chills run down their spines. "Welcome Classes 1 and 1B. It's a pleasure that you're all here today. Today is the start of one of our yearly exercises, the class civil war." This caused more murmurs, people whispering questions amongst themselves. In the middle of the crowd, Midoriya Izuku felt a flicker of recognition. He knew of this, but he couldn't place where he had heard of it before. He thought it was off of a hero training forum. Damn it, as you all know, a hero's job is to be wise, powerful, and proactive against evil wherever they find it. But often, you may find the other side of the law possesses the same traits, and you must learn to adapt, to improvise and overcome. Nedzu was moving emphatically with his words, silencing the crowd as they all focused on him. "As such, we will have 2 teams, the leaders of whom shall be chosen at random. However, the choice to be a hero or a villain is up to the rest of you. Do you wish to challenge yourself, to act in a new mindset as a villain, as a counterforce? Or do you wish to prove yourself as a hero, putting your potential into your dream? I can't wait to find out. Present Mike, if you please." With that, Nedzu stepped off the podium and Present Mike took the stage. There were a few scattered cheers from the crowd at that, along with determined grins and intense stares. "Now we shall choose the leaders of the heroes and the villains. These positions are locked and you must accept the role. Often, circumstance is what leads to greatness or leadership, so shall it be here too. First, the leader of the heroes, the Paragon." As the left side screen behind the podium flickered on, the faces of students flying past. Izuku felt his pulse race. Would it be him? Oh god, the nerves. The flickering faces began to slow, coming to a stop to reveal. Present Mike yelled, gesturing for a prideful and demonically grinning Bakugo to take his place at the right side of the podium. Behind them the image changed, a white crown animation coming to rest on Bakugo's headshot, and the katakana for Paragon appeared under his name. The assorted students looked interested, but some gave off the feeling of being less than enthused. "And now, for the villain, the kingpin, the darkness who you will face against." The roll began again, flickering through faces. Suddenly he felt a shiver go up and down his spine. He already knew what was going to happen. As the roll call slowed, and the final picture appeared, he knew he was right. MIDORIYAICZUUUKUUU. Present Mike screamed at the world, finger pointed straight at Izuku. Yes, there it was, green hair with a black crown animated on the brow, red background behind him. The title of Kingpin across his torso, highlighted in glowing red katakana, and a shy smile on his photo's expression. Without registering it, he had already made his way up to the podium. He felt like the world was glazed. Was he having a panic attack? No, maybe. No, just feels like a minor shock. Oh, fun. Good to know. Fuck. Present Mike was still talking, laying out a schedule for the next week. Tomorrow at midnight was the deadline to join a team. You had to have it declared to a teacher. Rooms would be set up for each team leader to plan and organize. A rulebook would be provided after the meeting, and could the two leaders stay behind? The rest of the classes filed out, slowly growing louder as they talked and debated with each other. Izuku was drowning that out. Instead, he was having a crisis of faith. Should he try to truly be a villain, to go against his own deeply ingrained morals and aim to win? Or should he let the heroes, the position he held so close to his heart, take the win without a fight? The meeting passed in a blur, Bakugo sneering and muttering curses as he listened to the rules. When Izuku was handed his copy, he began to focus once more. He picked up the basic parameters, the words piercing through the haze of dissociation. The practical part of the exam was in 7 days and would have a 3-day time limit. Each team would have to be finalized and delivered to the teachers on Monday, 2 days from now. A 5-day stretch from Tuesday to Saturday would have a lighter class load so the teams could plan, coordinate, and ready themselves. With that, they were dismissed. Bakugo stormed out with a look on his face that screamed he was going recruiting. Izuku got up to follow, but as he left, Present Mike caught his attention. Hey, Midoriya, Aizawa and Nezu wanted to talk to you. After all, you need to know your objectives. Wait, objectives. Day 1 to 6 hours, 0 minutes. Game start. Welcome to your mission briefing. Until now, you have not known the precise parameters of your mission. Aizawa-sensei stood before the assembled hero team. They were in their costumes, each with some variant of the UA symbol backed by wings added to represent them being part of the same team. Katsuki stood at the front, looking over the screens behind Aizawa as he took in what information they had. That's because, in the real world, you rarely know what your opponent is after. 1 hour ago, when the villains entered the city, the test began. Uraraka blinked in surprise, hearing mutters and curses from the other heroes. The chosen field for this is a place neither class has ever had a reason to visit before. Training Ground F, known among students as the Downtown District. It is a full 10 by 10 block of skyscrapers and apartments, modeled after the likes of New York and downtown Tokyo. He turned and tapped the computer behind him, pulling up a video feed. 3 unmarked white trucks entered the city at the start of the hour, the villains using them as an entry vector. One of them had a signal transceiver attached to the top, and we believe that is where the video that was sent to you was live streamed from. Traffic cameras tracked 2 of the box trucks, but the third, the one with the transceiver, took a back alley and seemed to disappear. At this point in time, we have no idea what exactly their plan is, but most support analysts agree this has the markings of a hostage situation. There are civil bots in most public places, simple mannequins with basic motor functions and sensors. Keep them alive and safe. They will run from fights and danger, replicating normal civilian reactions, but the villain's cannon will take them hostage. The screen changed once more, the video of the trucks vanishing to show one of the trucks backing up and parking at a loading dock. 4 figures in loose black jumpsuits, covered with hooded jackets, got out and began pulling cases from the truck. This is the back camera from the bank in the city. Soon after that, all camera feeds to and from the bank stopped. The screen flickered to another unloading. 5 equally disguised figures stepped out of another truck. All of them were armed with briefcases and carrying boxes of supplies. This is the only camera we have access to at the government building across the district from the bank. It seems the villains have split up, attacking multiple locations at once. The screens changed, the conference table that the heroes were gathered around lighting up with a hologram of the simulated city. Paragon, the mission command is yours. Your objectives are to detain or eliminate all villains, while avoiding civilian casualties or collateral damage to the best of your ability. Your priority, however, is to bring in the subject Kingpin alive for questioning. With that, Aizawa stepped away and the door opened. Katsuki stood, looking at the map. After a moment of consideration, he began to mark it with entry points. We'll start with 5 teams. Leaders are me, Ida, Todoroki, Shizaki, and Tsuburaba. Keep in contact. Ida, your team is hunting. Find that 3rd van. I don't trust not knowing where it's gone to, he said. Todoroki, Tsuburaba, your teams are heading for the district. Set up a forward camp and keep an eye out. Mai and Shizaki's teams will head out to the bank. If we work fast, we can stop them before they do any lasting damage. Keep in touch and keep each other updated. Move out, he called out, surprisingly professional for his normal demeanor. Heh, shitty Deku thinks he's going to outmaneuver me. He grinned, teeth pulled back in a vicious smile. I'll show you how worthless and beneath me you are. 7 days before the exam, Aizawa Shouto looked at his student, his exhaustion reaching even deeper than normal as he took in Midoriya's distant expression and strange mood. He had barely said anything, just sat there with a cup of tea in hand, staring into the steam. Just as Shouto was going to start, he was cut off. That selection was rigged, wasn't it? Midoriya's expression was sharp with the focus that Shouto had only seen when Midoriya or his friends were in danger. The intensity of it said that he was on overdrive, mind racing through mad plans and data. He had seen how Midoriya reacted during the USJ attack. He'd also heard about the stain incident. Yes, he wasn't going to lie. Not now. Midoriya was already exhibiting what Shouto wanted to see. That drive, but not for another. This time, only for himself. Fine. Midoriya held up his rulebook. Are these all the rules, in their entirety? Aizawa nodded. Yes. Midoriya lowered the book and with a quick motion drained his teacup. A moment of silence passed, the teen clearly considering something, before he looked up and met Aizawa's eyes once more. Please, tell me about the objectives. The meat of the conversation. There will be 15 objectives planted inside the city. To pass the exercise, you must acquire at least 5 of those objectives and escape with all or most of your team. Extra objectives will improve your final score and even contribute extra credit and help raise your grades, he said. Each objective is vaguely based on a different crime. Killing a specific civilian target, or acquiring one object or another, finding a certain document, perhaps destroying a certain server. Beyond that are the 2 other win conditions that you can complete. Escape the city on the 3rd day or make the heroes unable to continue or force them to retreat. If either of those 2 conditions are met, you automatically pass, even if it's on a technicality. Midoriya seemed distracted, lips moving slightly as he processed the new data before he looked back up. What about lost conditions? There are 3. All villains are taken down and captured. You, the Kingpin, are killed or captured by the hero team. Or you leave before the 3rd day, which would be considered a forfeit. Midoriya nodded thoughtfully. Then, almost hesitantly, he asked another question. Where's the test taking place? Training Ground F, the downtown district. An incredulous pause broke the conversation as Midoriya looked at him in realization. Shouto could tell Midoriya saw the faint grimace on Shouto's own face. After that, Midoriya went through a quick flash of various expressions. Aizawa caught both confusion and understanding. Sensei, when's the last time the villain team won this exercise? A pause stretched out by tension. Eventually, Shouto sighed. It was back when I was a first year. I heard about it through gossip and later from hero course classmates. There was a 3rd year with an overpowered fire and heat manipulation quirk. He works with Endeavor now. Endeavor himself is quite proud of being one of the only Kingpins to ever win, and even holds the current record. Even then, no villain team has ever won with full marks. But why? Midoriya asked hesitantly. If Shouto were a betting man, he'd say that Midoriya already knew the answer. Pausing, he decided to give the clarification anyways, giving a hard glare towards the cafeteria where the rest of the hero course would be. Because no hero wants to play the villain. They don't want to be the bad guy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, problem child. You're going to be outnumbered, overpowered. The game is going to be stacked against you. Which is a shame, because that makes this entire ordeal less effective. He glanced at Midoriya, who was now staring into his empty cup with a thoughtful expression. Slowly, that expression shifted. Thanks, Sensei. Midoriya placed the empty cup in his saucer and grabbed his rulebook before leaving. Shouto couldn't help the grin that stretched across his lips at the look and stance of his student as he exited the door. This year's Civil War would be interesting. Day 1 to 6 hours, 34 minutes. Tenya looked back, head counting his team once more. After getting a ride from a van to the simulation city, the driver had dropped them off less than 4 blocks from where the truck was last seen. Looking back at his team, he mentally reviewed each person and their quirk. Uraraka Ochako, his second, Zero Gravity. Shishida Jiroda, Brawler and Scent Tracker. Quirk, Beast, gives heightened animalistic senses and strength. Kodai Yui, the team defender, has a moderate growth quirk, can become a giant. Then his 5th, Tsunotori Pony, with the horn cannon quirk and mutation. While his team wasn't the strongest, Bakugo had made sure they had enough power to fight. Soon enough they found the alley, a thin canyon between 2 rows of buildings. Shishida-san, can you pick up anything from the trucks passing? The taller teen leaned forwards, crouching as he took deep, long breaths. I can smell exhaust and burned rubber. And look, skid marks. They stopped suddenly here for a bit, he pointed out, kneeling over some darker streaks in the alley pavement. Tenya looked up and around, the rest of the crew following suit. The buildings on either side of them were windowless, and the alley itself sloped down and back up on the far side. Tenya's eyes tracked along the wall and found something. There, a garage door. They never saw the truck leave, right? Ada-san, should we perhaps radio in? Kodai's quiet presence appeared at Ada's side, looking at him with curiosity, and he nodded in agreement. Ada tapped the side of his helmet, connecting to the group channel. Ada reporting, "My team and I have found signs of the third truck. There's a garage door down the alley. We want to see if they parked it here." "The hell are you waiting for? Glasses? Go look. Check in if you find shit. Or in half an hour." "Understood." Tenya tapped the comms inside. Bakugo may have tempered his language when directed towards his team, using it for his nemesis instead, but he was still terribly curt and unprofessional. Regardless, Tenya had a job to do. "Uraraka, Kodai, please keep an eye on the alley entrances. Shishida, Tsunotori, with me." The three headed in, eyes peeled. With careful steps, they reached the garage. A quick inspection revealed it was sturdy, likely another loading dock of some sort. Checking the digital lock next to it, Tenya turned when he heard Shishida inhale deeply. "The exhaust trail leads here. Shall we knock?" Tenya grinned. "Of course, Tsunotori-san. Would you care to perform the honors?" The horned girl grinned, skipping backward and crouching. "Yes," she said, and with a skip and a leap, she slammed into the garage door full force, horns shredding the metal so she could enter. As one, both men grabbed the sides of the entry and ripped it to the side, widening the hole for ease of access. They stepped in to join Tsunotori in a ready stance. Inside the room was indeed a loading dock, the ramp at the far end of the bay leading up to more doors. "Ada, you guys okay?" Uraraka's voice came over the comms, and Tenya took a moment to look around, eyeing the corners. "We are fine, but there's no sign of the truck. Or the villains." Indeed, the very bay itself, while filled with pallets and crates, had no truck present. The room was clean, however. No dust, no debris. It was almost creepy. "Shishida-san, is the scent still here?" Tenya asked. "Stronger than ever, Ida. It sat and idled here, I guarantee it," the beastly teen called, inhaling deeply once more. "Where did it went?" Tsunotori asked, looking around with confusion, unaware of her mangling of the language. "Spread out. Check for clues," Tenya decided, tapping the radio to contact the girls outside. "Uraraka, Kodai, no sign of the truck now, but it was definitely here. What's the plan?" came Kodai's quiet response. "Uraraka, get a rooftop perch and keep an eye on the alley. Kodai, circle around and tell us what this building is supposed to be. I'd rather not get blindsided by not knowing what to expect." 2 affirmatives later, the line went quiet once more. He looked at the others. Shishida was in the center of the room, trying to follow the scent trail. Tsunotori was jumping up and around the room, checking the boxes and walls for secret passages or weak points. Tenya was about to tell them to give up and move on when Tsunotori knocked down a stack of crates. "Tsunotori." Both boys cried out in annoyance, and she shyly bowed. "Sorry, those were really, really light. I got on them, I lost my..." She paused, looking at where the boxes had been. There, looking like it had been sunken and melted into the floor, was a manhole cover. Chaos. That's what the T intersection in front of the bank looked like. Cars were on their sides, piled up into rough barricades and covered in broken civil bot bodies. Some of them were still faintly trying to struggle out from where they were pinned, their AI too dumb to realize they were practically dead. Standing dead center on the wall-like pile of broken steel and glass, glaring down at the people approaching, were 2 dark figures. One wore a form-fitting black suit with a fedora and a bow tie in red, contrasting with his pitch-black skin and silver hair, which was styled flat and sleek. The other wore a ragged black cloak, but the abnormal shape of his head was clearly visible. "Kiruwaro and Takoyami," Shizaki Ibara murmured, looking at Katsuki who stood next to her, eyes focused on the blockade before the bank. "They can't possibly believe they can stop us just by themselves, can they? No, this is a trap." Katsuki eyed the skyline. Around the bank, the skyscrapers had backed off slightly, leaving the building just a bit taller at 10 stories than its nearest 6th-floor neighbors. "I just don't know what the consequence of tripping it is." 7 days before the exam, Izuku sat quietly at the back of the class, eyes roaming with a strange intensity. He concealed his act behind the guise of reading the rulebook. Already, he's found 3 loopholes that would allow him to stack the deck in his favor, and his mouth moved silently as he thought through Class 1A's weaknesses. He needed potency, people whose powers would counter the greatest amount of opponents at once. He could already tell by Ada, Uraraka, and Todoroki's attitudes and quiet demeanor that they were all torn, though he expected all 3 would go to the hero side of the fight, with his blessings. But he could probably get some of the others. Asui would be a good pick, an all-around physical fighter with agility. Takoyami as well, if only for the sheer power of his quirk. If he could get Hagakure and Ajiro, that would offer him more options. And with 2 agility-based fighters he could look for more utility potential, things that would let him acquire his objectives. He could already tell that Kaminari, Kirishima, and Siro were all siding with Bakugo. But Ashido looked torn, despite her hero name being somewhat villainous. The Alien Queen. Aoyama was a wild card. His narcissistic personality could veer him one way or the other. But having a glass cannon like him on the villain side would be a stroke of luck. Minda would be determined by which side had the most hot bods, as he said. Jiryu, she was glancing at him and then back to. Izuku paused, green eyes meeting gray. Yaoyorozu Momo smiled and nodded. Well then, that made the entire game change. Now, he had access to resources. He smiled back and tapped the cover of his book, grinning. His eyes roved over the last of the room. Kuda, undecided. Sato, probably a hero. Shaoji, hero, maybe. And then Class 1B. Yeah, he could make this work. Day 1 to 7 hours, 14 minutes. In all honesty, Shadow could do without the long silences of the fake city. While it was decorated with cars, and the occasional civil bot stood or wandered small paths through the streets, the city itself was quiet. On the corner across the intersection from his hiding place was a short wall and squat building identified as the district's government building. It was a horrendous piece of postmodern architecture, all blocky, brutalist angles and large windows. He and his team were crouched in an alley while Tsuburaba's team had taken overwatch on a nearby roof. A glance back showed his capture squad. Bondo Kajiro, the towering giant with the adhesive quirk, stood at the back of the group, crouched. One of his teammates, the petite Komori Kanoko, sat on his shoulder, arm already half covered with moss and small mushrooms as she used her quirk. She sent the spores towards the building to help prepare to seal it off. Closer were the other two members, Minta Minoru, the mini pervert with the sticky balls, and Shiro Hanta with the tape quirk. Looking up, he tapped the small earpiece he wore, contacting Tsuburaba's team. Tsuburaba, we are preparing to seal the building off. Any sign of the villains? Not yet. There are several downed civil bots in that courtyard, though, most moving weakly. Tsuburaba's voice echoed slightly over the radio, but Shadow heard it just fine. Understood. Keep me updated. With that, he tapped his comm again and considered how to proceed. He decided a dash to get closer, even if just to the outer wall, would be best. Komori, start with the paralytics. Everyone else, medical masks. Shiro, Minta, and Shadow all slid their masks on. Then, with a nod, Tsuburaba turned the corner. Filled with purpose, he began striding out into the street towards the government building. His team falling in a diamond position. Contact, front doors, single target. The crackle of the radio was unexpected, making his team tense as they continued. He's moving to meet you. Watch out. The heroes were halfway across the intersection when a figure dressed in matte black body armor and deep blue accents, a long black jacket, gas mask, and hood stepped out from around the corner of the gate, one hand up in a placating motion. Heroes, so nice of you to show up. A muffled and distorted voice called out. Shadow slowed, the rest of his team spreading out behind him. Flank and capture. Go, Shadow began. I really wouldn't, heroes. From his pocket, the villain pulled a very easily identifiable object. Black plastic, a big red trigger, and a radio receiver antenna. The detonator. After all, the fireworks show we have prepared is very loud. Shadow stopped, tensing. This wasn't an assault mission anymore. It was now a hostage situation. Over the comm, he could already hear Tsuburaba radioing in. Bakugo would never let him live this down. Katsuki jumped, using an explosion to twist in midair, dodging back. The early morning sunlight was their biggest ally and their biggest enemy right now. Hiruaro's quirk, black, allowed him to fuse with the black air cast by the shadows and smoke, which made the entire area of space he was connected to pitch black. That amorphous cloud was wrapped around the middle of the street, centered on Takoyami. The fact that the streets leading up to the sun-backed bank were cast in shadows meant that they were almost entirely consumed by the shifting and twisting mass of darkness. A glance at the clock told Katsuki he had time on his side, as noon would be approaching, but that didn't really matter because he leapt over a massive chunk of a car being slammed out of the shadows. Dark Shadow was more than powerful enough to rip through anyone in his way while in the shadows, and that wall of cars wasn't a blockade. A twisted chunk of bus crashed off the nearby walls, shattering a glass storefront. It was ammunition. Katsuki had already ordered Shizaki's team and his own to start rescuing civil bots, rushing them to a designated shelter a few blocks away. At this point, despite Katsuki's sincere anger at the situation, all he could do was wait for the sun to rise high enough so they could get close. He glanced around. His team was the hammer of the squads. Tetsu, Kirishima, Sato, and Rin Huryu, all physical fighters with some form of strength or durability enhancement. Even now, they were holding the line, catching or deflecting the tossed bits of automobiles, while Shizaki's more range and utility-focused support team dealt with civilians. He hissed as he got a report over the comms from Tsuburaba. Half and half was stuck in a standoff, and they had no idea who the opponent they faced was. All they could tell was that they were male, taller than normal, and didn't show signs of a mutation quirk, and had a gas mask, so the spores from Shroom Girl wouldn't affect him. That narrowed it down to maybe one of 5 possible people. The 4 Class B guys who were villains, or Aoyama. It probably wasn't Aoyama, given the figure wore all black and blue. As Katsuki blasted another flying tire out of his way, he looked up. It was almost 9 o'clock now. 2 hours and the sun would be high enough to attack again. For now, he gritted his teeth and fell back, barking orders over the comms. He would set up a perimeter, keep the place on lockdown, and see what high class says. After all, he had a better plan than to send his most mobile team into the tunnels, where they would be at a heavy disadvantage. Instead, he would call them over to help with the bank. He could use another flank. 7 days before the exam, Izuku sat with his back to a tree in the courtyard. He had a few minutes before he had to leave, and there was something about the rules he wanted to check one more time. Rule 12. Heroes and villains are not allowed to enlist the support of UA teachers and staff for extra equipment or training for the exam. UA staff are to be neutral and objective observers of the teams involved. What was more interesting was what it didn't specify. He stood and stretched, before turning and almost running into someone. "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there." "No problem," came the quiet voice, as Izuku looked up at the taller boy. He recognized the distinctive 6 arms and face mask. "I was actually looking for you, Shaoji-san." Izuku tilted his head, curiosity in his eyes. "Could we, perhaps, walk and talk?" Shaoji gestured towards the path leading away from UA. Of course, Shaoji and Izuku shared pleasant small talk for several minutes until they were close to the gate and away from people. "I'll be clear and simple. I want to join the villain team." Izuku beamed up at Shaoji. "Of course you can join. Is there any particular reason why?" Shaoji shrugged, looking off into the trees. "At the sports festival, I felt like I underperformed. I was key in the second match, defending my team, but it felt cheap, particularly when losing. Then I saw you and Todoroki fight and was in awe. You and Todoroki fought like the world was about to end because of ideals. Beyond that, I know you tend to plan and outwit most people in class when it comes to quirks, and I have a strong feeling you can win this. And I'd like to be on the winning side for once." Shaoji trailed off, voice softer for that last part. He jerked when Izuku grabbed his shoulder. "Well then," came Izuku's voice, dark green eyes glinting with something akin to sharp glee. "I suppose I can't let you down now, can I?" Shaoji was still off guard when Izuku turned and started walking. "Come on, villain. Let's see what we can work out before we head home." After a moment, Shaoji was quick to follow his new leader. Day 1, 11 hours, 2 minutes. Ida and his team are regrouping at the bank. Shaoji Mezu looked over the wall of holograms and camera feeds from across the city, his top arms folded across his chest as the lower 4 deftly manipulated the images on the screen. Todoroki and Tsuburaba are holding, but Todoroki retreated back to the far side of the street. Mezu had been impressed by the outfit given to him the day before, courtesy of Mei and Momo. It consisted of deep blue slacks, a crisp white shirt somehow tailored for all his arms, and a black tie. Along with those were a pair of black suspenders, a deep green and black vest, a new mask, and a matching hat. His hat was a full-on Stetson, broad-curled rim, angled pinch, and tan leather for the band. Alongside his boss, it was clear that he was the muscle, the left hand. The mask itself was slightly different from his usual cloth. It was taller, coming to just under his eye sockets, and made of a tougher plastic material. After taking a few minutes to adjust, it had seemed to practically melt into his skin along the edge. And the note from Hacker and Forgery informed him that it was able to filter the air. That was a nice benefit. "Radio check," came the voice of Izuku from the table behind him. "This is Blackout. Nightmare and I are both losing steam. The sunlight has reached the end of the block and is pulling up on the doors. We are pushing our limits as it is. This is Hold Up. The standoff's getting tense. We've both taken to resting on our sides of the street, but sooner or later the tension's gonna blow. They keep looking like they're ready to jump the gun. This is PR. I got the bank vault open and the objective's been retrieved, waiting for the ground team to open the exit. This is Smuggler. Bank sub-basement is estimated 5 minutes from contact. Larceny here. Beta charges placed. Detonation is at your command. Forgery speaking. We are still looking for Objective 3, but we have number 2 held captive and ready for transport. We require an opening to get underground. Confirmed all. Hold positions. Update coming in 5. Mezu nodded while marking each objective down and looked back. There, sitting with his mask held up to the light, was Izuku with the other 2 members of the King team. To the left was a figure, dressed much like Izuku but with the full suit jacket and tie. A black vest on a black shirt, together with a green tie. A full-face helmet with a glowing green question mark hid his features and hair. A fedora accented with a purple and green flower in its band rested on top of it. He tilted his head, and a slightly distorted drawl came through the speakers. "Well, now, it seems that makes 4 objectives in reach of our hands. 11 still left to hunt for." The other figure nodded, tapping furiously on her computer. Her outfit was different, a long black dress with pink-tinged snake-scale patterns winding around it. Her mask was a full-face gas mask, with an attached hood and short scarf around her neck. "We have possible locations for another 7 objectives, and Animal is continuing his search pattern from the tunnels to try and find the rest. Standing up, Kingpin walked around the holograms to a slot of light between two curtains in a large glass window and looked out, observing the noon sun rising into position. Pull the cash-out plan on the bank. Hacker, con man, you're going to be up in a few hours. Get some rest. We've been up half the night. Assault. Help set up a chase with the government crew. Have hold up and graffiti take the truck and a civil bot hostage. Have drug runner prep for them in the northern half. In the fourth tunnel, he called out, eyes tracing the faint lines of smoke from near the bank. And tell them to bust out the guns for this. Leave an impression. Will do, King. Mezu nodded. Con man and Hacker both murmured agreement, stretching before they stood and headed for the doors to the left. Mezu started to relay orders and Izuku stood silent, waiting. The opening moves were done. Bakugo was going to force the momentum sooner rather than later. All he had to do was lead it the wrong way. Time to change the rules. Too bad. It's a nice-looking bank too. Ijiru was pumped. The tension, the fight against the dark forces of evil that Takoyami and Kiwaro presented. It was so manly, and he got to work with Tetsu. The two of them had a hell of a time blocking and catching the incoming vehicles. Even with strength and durability, momentum was still momentum and Dark Shadow had a hell of a throwing arm. As the bright light of high noon finally began to hit, he watched the two villains retreat into the bank. Kiwaro turned the dark space behind the glass into a wall of twisting shadows as the two vanished. Bakugo stood next to him, standing at the end of the street. A moment passed, and he reached up, tapping his earbud. Ada, swing wide to flank. Shizaki, try and clear an entrance on a higher floor. We'll charge in 60 seconds. As they gathered, ready to move, there was a sudden sound in the silence. Bakugo's phone was ringing. What the fucking hell, he muttered. Ijiru was sure Bakugo had silenced it. Weird. Bakugo lifted it and saw a new text message with another video stream link. He glanced up and scowled before tapping the link. A moment of loading later, it started to play. "Aw, Kakin, I have to say, you and your teams have been impressive so far. Ada even found the access point. I was sure that would be a secret for a while longer. Get to the fucking point, Deku. What the fuck are you calling me for? Oh, just keeping you away from the bank for a bit longer. Don't want you caught in the blast radius after all. Enjoy the show." With a click, the stream cut off. Tetsu paused, blinking in confusion, looking at the bank. What does he mean by blast? Things happened quickly, but everyone would remember it for years to come. First was a flash. The windows on the bottom floor, no longer concealed by Kiwaro's blinding smoke, were blasted out by a shockwave, followed by a burst of flames. Along the central column of the building, more explosions rang out in quick succession, the windows blowing out in a cascade of broken shards leading up. For a moment it was still, before with a slow echoing crash, the building began to fold in, collapsing in on itself, sending a cloud of dust racing through the streets. All of the teams present covered their faces, trying to see through the dust as it lingered. When it finally began to thin, they almost wished it hadn't. The building was gone, nothing but rubble spilling into the adjacent buildings and the street in front of it. He blew up the building. Sato was trying to stay calm, but Kirishima could see the faint glint of terror in his eyes. At that moment, he couldn't blame him. This was suddenly far more real than he thought it would be. 6 days before the exam, Izuku ate slowly, taking time to send glances at Shoji, Yaoyorozu, and Jiru before tilting his head at the doorway to each of them. Soon enough, Izuku cleaned off his plate and slowly made his way to the door, out of his periphery. He could see Jiru and Yaoyorozu stand and walk to empty their tray and Shoji beginning to stand as well. He pulled out a notebook, flipping through to the new pages he had started last night. Were written notes about the 3 people who had confirmed villain status, or at least implied it. Shoji's questions were mostly limited to his arm's capabilities, how complex and how detailed he could manipulate his flesh. A quick sketch of a possible villain attire added to the paper. Similar sketches and notes filled pages for Yaoyorozu and Jiru, though he left the weakness section blank. If they paid attention and decided to suddenly defect and join the heroes, he'd rather keep the weaknesses he had noticed as surprises. He stood and waited and soon the 2 girls stepped out, glancing around before Jiru stepped forwards. "Hiya, boss. We want to join the villains." They paused as Izuku roved his eyes around. "I'm not exactly in a position to decline, you understand. But why join me? Maita. In part, we plan to tell him we're joining the heroes and then pull a fast one." Beyond that, Jiru trailed off, looking at Yaoyorozu. "In the sports festival, we didn't do very great. Both us were taken out in the cavalry round and we feel like we were unprepared. Now that we've gone to internships, despite how useless my internship was, we want to prove we are better than we were," she swore, looking up at Izuku, who was shocked to see the sheer anger in her gaze. "Well, welcome aboard." Izuku gave a smile, rubbing his head sheepishly, and the tension drained from the group. With that, Izuku turned and started walking, leaving the girls to look on in confusion before jumping as a rough voice spoke up behind them. We should follow him. I think we'll find it quite informative, the six-armed teen muttered, before nudging them both gently. The girls nodded, and the three villain team members hurried to catch up to their leader. Before long they stood together looking at a heavy-duty steel door with the name card that inspired fear in those who recognized the name on a personal basis. Support Lab 4, Hatsume. Day 1, 11 hours, 19 minutes. The standoff at the government building was momentarily distracted. The sound of explosions and the growing cloud of dust and smoke in the distance made all heads turn that way. The heroes looking on with disbelief, the villains with a sense of relief and tension. Next was his turn. Inside his gas mask, Kaibara-sen was also talking frantically with his partner. He said to use the gun. You heard him as well as I did. I'm just thankful that Forgery is here to help me finish setting this up, and I hope to God that Hacker's guns work the way she said. This is going to be rough either way. Fine. Forgery, Sparkle, you two good? He asked. We'll be fine. Animal already has the escape route open and we are less than a minute from the third objective. Then we'll take the low road back to HQ. It is quite a shame that we didn't have enough explosives to blow up the government building in its entirety in order to cover our tracks, but we have enough incendiaries to make do. Your bluff was well played. All right, I'll kick us off here, I guess. See you guys soon, Sen muttered, seeing the heroes turn back. He raised his hand, showing the detonator with a tilt of his head that belied amusement. The sound of an engine roaring to life echoed over the radio. Oh, and a waste. If you run me over, I'll fucking break your neck, he muttered. Oh, relax. I know how to drive a box truck. I do it for my uncle during the summer all the time. The sound of the truck roared, and he could hear the squealing of the tires. Minoru shivered, seeing the explosion in the distance, hearing the swears and exclamations over the comms. It was frightening. He had joined the heroes because he overheard that Jiru and that smoking hot piece of Asya Urazu would be joining. And by the time he realized otherwise, he was here. And then Bakugo, the fucker, had to put him on a team with only one girl. And now he had to deal with this bullshit. Explosives. He shivered, glancing back at the masked guy with the damn detonator. He was tempted to just run. Fuck the consequences. The villain spoke. Well, it's been real and it's been fun. But it hasn't been real fun. You get what I'm saying, heroes. Wait, what was going to? But you know how it goes. Your team finishes up a mission. You realize your bluff is boring and you call a ride. My goober should be here any. The last word was cut off. The sound of a truck engine roaring to life as it came swerving and drifting around the corner to the north. Minoru panicked, looking at the once white truck. The rear box was now a deep red moment, and painted with a massive black sigil. A black blade wreathed in black wings sweeping down from the handle, with a bright acid green V overlaid over the entire image. A voice yelled, both over the communicator in his ear and from in front of him. It was Todoroki. The detonator is fake. He bluffed us. Attack now. In a panic, Minoru reached up, beginning to frantically toss his sticky balls at the gas-masked figure while Todoroki reached back and readied a wave of ice. Zero and Bondo began to fire glue and tape at the figure too. With a shout, the figure seemed to twist and crouch before he was assuredly springing across the street, dodging the first wave of the attacks. He seemed to twist and shift, parts of his body rotating at his joints to toss him from side to side and redirect his motion across the asphalt around the assault of quirks. Fuck, that's Kaibara. He's a close-range fighter, don't let him get near. Whatever else Tsuburaba was going to say was drowned out as the squeal of braking tires and the skidding of steel on steel made Minoru turn. He barely had time to take in what was happening before a blur of blue ice from Todoroki blasted out. The elemental teen had unleashed his readied ice in surprise, which is perhaps the only thing that prevented a skidding box of steel that had detached from the driving truck from slamming them head-on. The cargo box also broke the line of sight with Kaibara, leaving their only information a muttered holy shit over the comms. The team, with Minoru following with reluctance, swarmed to climb the ramp Todoroki made to reach over the cargo box. When Minoru finally stood on top of the box, he froze with terror and nearly shit his pants. There, bolted to the floor of the truck bed, was a fucking anti-aircraft turret. Kaibara was grabbing and twisting that strange twisted body thing, proving he was using his quirk to help aim. As it swung around, Minoru could clearly make out the words Hatsume Industries painted in bright pink on the outside surface of two of the four boxy barrels closest to them. At the back, there were large canisters full of ammo connected with belts hanging from each. Kaibara-sen's voice, still distorted by his mask, called out, "Surprise, motherfuckers." Todoroki instantly summoned a flowering shield of ice, diving backward. Bondo formed a wall of quick hardening glue as he turned to cover a screaming Komori. Zero was also diving back, one arm flailing as he used the tape to yank him down and out of the line of fire. Minoru didn't react in time. All he heard was a sudden rapid-fire rattle, like someone had dropped the world's largest collection of balls down steel escalators, before he was engulfed in pain. Pain in the color red. Kaibara-sen grunted with exertion, The recoil wasn't that bad, but aiming accurately with the turret was a bitch. The red goo rounds May had taught Momo to make was harmless, really. A quick setting, hard coating red goo that would dry in seconds to be breathable, albeit hard to break. It was technically the evolution of paintballs. It was far more debilitating, and you could still technically fight even if disabled. The fact it left bruises was par for the course and a valuable learning experience. That was a single shot, however, and May had not held back with the fucking beast of a gun she had sent out. 4 muzzles. A firing rate of 25 rounds fired per second, each with a full 7,500 rounds of ammo per gun. In May's words, you have about 5 minutes of fuck that one thing in particular. Make them count. As he swept up, he saw the perverted little purple bitch get slammed with the wave of red with satisfaction. He snapped the turret across the ice and the glue, painting both with a quick hardening shell to slow them down. Graffiti hit the gas, he yelled, shifting the turret up and around to strafe the perch where the second team was. They were already diving for cover as he pressed back down on the triggers. At that moment, as he smelled burning rubber from the spinning wheels, he glimpsed an inferno coming from the other side of the red-coated ice. He strafed back and blinked at the hiss of steam as the bullets of paint evaporated. And then the van was skidding away like a rocket, chased by a wall of flame twice its size. Cursing, Sen stepped down, feet flat and stance low as he tried to stay on the back of the truck. Luckily, that's when the incendiaries in the government building went off. The windows around the back lower floor of the government building blew out, a wave of flame encasing the lower level. He could see through the inferno that Todoroki's eyes widened and he started to gesture. The 3 members of his team still up all turned and started towards the fire. Good escape, but Bakugo's already been informed. He's sending people to try and cut you off at the pass. Take the next left, head to the north stash. Hacker's voice, full of glee, came over the comms. They'll remember how my baby performed. That was awesome. As the truck went to take a corner at high speed, Sen sent a few shots down the streets, splattering the corners in case anyone got the idea to come storming around there. Glad you enjoyed it, Hacker. Coming up on the parking garage for entry now. 2nd floor down, southeast wall, yeah. That's correct, Kingpin cut in. Come on home, boys. We have lunch ready at Woods. I think it's time to start to talk about the changes to Phase 2. With a grunt, Sen spun the turret so it was aligned with the rear of the truck once more, kicking a locking mechanism into place. Yostsu, take us in. With pleasure, Sen. And with a turn and the skid of tires on asphalt, they entered a subterranean parking lot, driving deep under the layers of parking and below the city, leaving no trace for the heroes to find. 6 days before the exam, Izuku stood before Hatsume, watching her flip through the notes he had taken that morning just for her. I have to say 10 million, you are ambitious. That's good. It's fun that way. She flipped through the book some more before her expression fell. But I can't make some of this. Designing it would be fine, but production would take days for some of these smaller parts. The comms and computers in particular. Even the best of 3D printers and mills can only build so much so fast, and there's a waiting list for that, she sighed. As it is now, unless you have a miracle, there is no way to get most of this done, especially considering the suits and the materials going into them. Izuku nodded along. Well, you see, I actually do have a miracle. Or more precisely, I have a team member with your miracle. He turned and looked at a suddenly surprised Yaoyorozu. So what do you think, feeling creative Yaoyorozu? He gave her a shy and genuine smile, filled with eagerness and hope. Yaoyorozu couldn't help but laugh softly. You can call me Momo, Midoriya. And sure, I'll help her out. But you're buying me dinner sometime soon for this. Wait, explain, Hatsume said, glancing around. Let me introduce your new best friend. This is Momo. She has a quirk that lets her make anything as long as she knows its composition inside and out. All you have to do is buy her dinner, Izuku said, before looking at Momo and smiling. And please, Momo, call me Izuku. Hatsume froze. Slowly she turned, looking at Momo dead on. As the 2 girls began to talk, Izuku leaned back, slowly letting a breath out. He was surprised when he felt someone approach and looked to see Jiru at his side. That was interesting, Green. You normally aren't that suave. What's up? Izuku blinked and then blushed. Well, I'm supposed to be the villain, right? So last night I watched a bunch of HeroTube videos about famous fictional and historical villains. What makes a villain a good character? How do you make a villain threatening? What traits do villains have? I've been using them to try and act like a villain. Is that weird? That's really cool, actually. Your method acting. That's really important for a stage persona. Just remember to keep some of your personality in there too, yeah. Now come on, let's get the geeks apart. We need to head back to class soon. Jiru stepped away and towards the girls, but Izuku was caught in thought. Method acting. That might just be the key I needed to do this. I just need the right script. Day 1, 13 hours 38 minutes. It had taken the hero teams 2 hours to regroup, put out the fire at the government building, and sort through the rubble of both sides. Finally, tired and low on morale, they trekked through the city towards the fake hero agency building they were all staying. A skyrise on one of the 4 center blocks of the fake city, a full 13 stories of rooms and basic equipment and records. Katsuki turned to address the gathered teams as they stood in the lobby. Listen up. We need to take time to rest and rearm ourselves. Zero, Hagakure, head up to the medical bay. Set a damn alarm for 6 hours so that you both can get back in this godforsaken game of tag. Take time to eat and go the fuck to sleep. Grapefucker got slimed and has been deemed eliminated, so feel free to eat or use anything given to him. It's all extra right now. This goes for the rest of you too. Rest up. We're going to swap to the 3-team rotation we talked about on Thursday. Shizaki, Todoroki, Tsuburaba, and Ada, come with me for debriefing. We're going to call back to HQ, see if they have an update on the whys and hows for this clusterfuck. If you're not sleeping, your comm stays on. And if horror movie shit goes down, you fucking call me, got it? He was answered by a wave of tired agreement and grunted. Good, get some rest, fuckers. He stormed off and was followed by the squad leaders. A few minutes of wandering and exploring later, they found the operations center, a large room with a gleaming white conference table. Katsuki stood in front of the table as the others slumped in their seats. Ida took off his glasses to massage his eyes. Todoroki sunk down further in his seat and Shizaki seemed to murmur a half-asleep prayer. Katsuki synced his phone and it saved mission files with the computer in the table. The holograms of the tables showed the current state of the city, both buildings attacked by villains sketched in red against cool blue. Fuck, let's take this step by step. Ada, where's the building where you lost the truck's trail? Ada put his glasses back on and looked, before reaching out and tapping a building on what looked like a slow shift towards where a more industrial district would be. Here, Uraraka and Kodai identified it as a market, Yuki's winter goods, and you said it was some sort of tunnel or pipe down. Indeed, it was embedded into the ground and looked as if the concrete had melted around it. None of my team were suited to break through that, with the possible exception of Tsunotori. Ada pulled his own phone, sending a picture to be displayed on the table. Suddenly, Tsuburaba blinked and leaned in. That's Honuki Juzawa's work. He softens the material, then deforms it and lets it resolidify. It's how he tried to trap Midoriya in the sports festival. He's one of the recommended students, skilled as well as smart. Tsuburaba also pulled out his phone, bringing up his classmate's profile and linking them to the current investigation on the table. The meeting continued like this. Each piece of evidence they found and each sighting of a villain was marked. Recordings of the original live stream and the explosion warning were linked, along with whatever technical data their phones had recorded. In the end, they had 4 confirmed villain sightings. Takoyami Fumikage and Kiwaro Shihai at the bank, Midoriya Izuku over the live stream, and Kaibara-sen at the government building. They also had another 7 unconfirmed sightings, the 5 other people who left the 2 vans in the original security footage, and the person driving the truck with the turret. Finally, there were the signs of Honuki Juzawa at the underground entrance. There were 11 villains they had seen. That left 4 they hadn't. Katsuki pulled up the city infrastructure files and began to overlay them. Quickly, everyone saw the connection. Sewer system. Yua, that has to be gross. Shizaki cringed, imagining what it would be like to deal with sewage in her vines. Not really. The city is fake. The infrastructure would have to be damn near unused. But what that means is that the villain team has a network of 5-foot diameter tunnels that lead below every building in the city. But look at this. The market. It's over a larger cistern and flooding chamber. That's more than large enough to hide a truck if you could get it in there. Aside from that, the other 2 buildings don't make sense. The tunnels are more than 10 feet below the basements in each building. You'd have to have heavy equipment to move that much material, and even then it'd be hard to get through. Or Honuki could soften it and you could literally claw your way through, Tsuburaba muttered, his own screen pulled up across the table as he reviewed the events of the government building once more. He paused. He had a video feed from an intersection camera and paused it to look at the picture of Kaibara-sen on the truck. Then he noticed something. Hold up. What's Hatsum Industries? Across from him, Ida froze. The villains were gathered, sitting in a restaurant and enjoying a fine meal prepared by both their illustrious leader and a few other members of the team. Uesuyosu had helped out in the kitchen, same with Monomanito and Aoyama Yuga. Soon, everyone was enjoying a massive pot of sukiyaki with plenty of toppings for everyone to choose from. Izuku himself sat on the counter leading to the kitchen, putting him slightly taller than the rest of the villains, with the exceptions of Shaojimezu and Kudakuji, who were leaning against the walls nearby and conversing quietly. Finishing his bowl, he saw that most of the teams were close to finishing or done. He pulled out a bottle of water and sipped it as he waited for the teams to finish, smiling between sips. He picked up bragging from the techie table about the explosives that Yaoyorozu, Momo, and Hatsume designed, and how Nito helped with production to an interested Ashido, Mina, and Jiru Kyoyuka. Another table is nothing but low murmurs, the more gothically inclined of his team relaxing and chatting. It was composed of Honuki Juzawa, Takoyami Fumikage, Kiwaro Shihai, and Yanagi Ryaiko. They looked remarkably relaxed, dressed in shades of black, gray, and red. Really, even with the dressed-up nature of their outfits, something that some of the others had issues wearing without feeling out of place, the table looked remarkably carefree and stylish. The third table had the last of the members conversing quietly, though two of them looked dead on their feet. Yosu was tired from the stress of driving through a battlefield, and Kaibara-sen had been tense and tightly wound for nearly the last 4 hours since he had to bluff the heroes. They were chatting quietly with Aoyama Yuga and Kendo Itsuka. Across from them was an empty seat, Con Man having left earlier to get some more sleep, which was fine. His act wasn't until midnight anyway. As seconds and desserts were finished off, Izuku clapped his hands. "We have done really well, ladies and gentlemen. Everything is going better than I scheduled. We already have 3 of the 15 objectives, and we all know where a 4th sits, for now." A low chuckle ran through the room. Everyone knew where the 4th was and why they hadn't taken it yet. It was a trap unlike any other, and would no doubt put them on the back foot. Beyond that, thanks to the firepower of Mei, our wonderful hacker, we even took out the slime ball Mineta. At this all the girls clapped, and Kyoyuka even wolf whistled in Sen and Yosu's direction, getting blushes and mock bows from the 2 boys. However, from now on we have to be better. Bakugo is already regrouping with his team, and likely preparing to respond violently and drastically to anything we do. As such, we're going to Phase 2. Duo operations. Izuku looked around and saw everyone glance at their designated partner. Good. They better have remembered after 3 days of practicing combinations. Yosu and Sen, Fumikage and Shihai, and Juzawa and Itsuka. The 6 of you can go get some rest. You've all been busy and stressed. Mina and Ryaiko, you two can also rest for a while, but no sleeping. We still need you for an entry in about an hour. After that, feel free to return to here or to the tower and get some sleep. He checked they were all fine with that and turned to the teams of true importance for this next part. Kyoyuka, Momo, Nito, and Yuga, your targets are up next. I've already sent you the plans. Remember, keep them from seeing you. Hacker will be available for support and research. Make sure to ask if you have any questions. Be careful. You are all key to the endgame. With the heroes ensconced in their base, we have a window of opportunity, but the moment they get an alert, all of you will be in deep shit. Izuku leaned forwards, face serious. The 4 nodded, faces grim and determined. Fuji, feel free to relax. You can pick back up searching when your allies actually have a lead. We have enough places to check now as it is. Mezu, Mei, head to the tower. I'll follow in a few minutes, just gonna clean up here. The last of the villains filed back, taking the stairs behind the bar down into the basement, where an entrance into the sewers had been formed. A few minutes later, Izuku put the last of the dishes down and looked at the figure lurking in his kitchen. All right, how did the hero investigation go? They know the basics, and because of Ida, they know about the sewers. Beyond that, the teachers have yet to update them. I figure it's a matter of time. Thanks, extortion. Return to the hero base. Don't let anyone know you left. Of course. With quiet footsteps, the figure vanished from the restaurant. Izuku finished setting the dishware away and paused. He looked in the mirror, adjusting his hat and straightening his outfit, eyes drawn to the camera he knew was in the corner of the room. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Or perhaps they all get played. Turning off the lights, Izuku left. The first act was over. Now on to the interlude. 6 days before the exam. Izuku looked at his list. In the last 4 hours, the students of the hero classes had taken sides. After an argument with the rest of his class, Monoma had joined the villains, followed by a nervous Kendo. A few minutes of conversation later, and the information that Momo would be on the same team helped improve Kendo's mood tremendously. With her help, he had talked a bit and gotten both Oase and Kaibara to join him, while Takoyami apparently asked if the ghouls of Class 1B wanted to join him. Seems that Honuki, Kiwaro, and Yanagi were all too pleased to accept the offer. Takoyami himself had joined up of his own volition, deciding that to work in the night would be a masterful use of his skills. Izuku was quite happy to agree. He had been surprised not long after, when both Aoyama and Kuda joined, each preferring not to elaborate on their choice. Then, there was the Baka Squad's self-destruction. It had been fairly quick, but Izuku caught the start of it. Kaminari had suggested some sort of plan to celebrate winning, leading with something like, since Bakugo is leading us, there's no need for us to really do anything, is there? He'll straight up bulldoze the other team. Ashido had gotten snarky in return, talking about how that didn't help at the beginning of the year. Thankfully, Bakugo had been visiting Class 1B at the time. Not long after, Ashido had approached Izuku, and when Bakugo came back, he was frustrated to see her sitting on the villain side of the room. He was somewhat saddened that most of his friends were going to be heroes, but Ada wanted to prove himself after the stain incident. Todoroki had mentioned that Endeavor had all but commanded he win as a villain and refused to give the Firefly bastard any satisfaction. Uraraka joined the heroes to fight him and stated it quite clearly. It only stoked Izuku's own fire in the end. Then there were the secret weapons. Hatsune was the easier of the two, bringing up how it would let her field test her babies, how it would be a demonstration to the rest of the hero course, how her equipment could be used practically, the sheer variety they could use and show off. Compared to a simple fight like the sports festival, she caved in minutes. His other secret recruit was a harder sell, but the idea of training and getting one over on the best of the hero course and UAS own bias testing by showing just how powerful they could be. Well, needless to say, Con Man was happy to join his ranks. Beyond that, Izuku was in his element. It wasn't a sudden duel in a back alley or a test with no prep time. This was a chance to fully abuse tactics, quirk interactions, and psychological warfare. Izuku hit the ground running. First off, while the team was finalizing, he got everyone's numbers, typing them up and linking to a chat. Then he sent out info packets, instructions, useful resources to read up on, and questions about what exactly their limits were. Some of them he sent full books of resources, like Momo. For others, like Ashido, he sent more creative video examples, with more interesting to look at and easy to understand tools and information. But there was someone he wanted to talk to about this in person. So after class, he asked Shoji to join him in a simple walkthrough of the training ground they would use. And there, the two sparred. Izuku asked questions, pushed him. Shoji had come to Izuku first, had asked, had pushed, had wanted to win. He gave Izuku that first push to get out of his own mind, to actually act and decide to play the villain. He would pay that back by making Shoji a dangerous foe and an invaluable ally. Day 0, 5 hours, 5 minutes. Shoto looked over the rest of the teachers from where his sleeping bag was resting against the wall. Most of them were freshly awake and carried small bags of snacks and notebooks to take notes in. Every year this was as much of a test of the teachers' attention spans and will to stay awake as it was of the students' skills and capabilities. Shoto himself had woken up nearly 3 hours earlier to help oversee the villain team as they initiated the first of their plans. He was unusually prepared for this year as well. Inside his sleeping bag, he had stashed plenty of caffeine-heavy drinks, a pair of thick, unused notebooks, and a smaller notebook given to him by the villain team called Stage Directions. That had been a trip to read. Honestly, when he originally proposed that Bakugo and Midoriya be chosen for the hero and villain roles, he had done so with the hope that putting them in positions of leadership would dull their bad habits. Midoriya was far too meek and willing to take a backseat in planning when it wasn't life or death, and Bakugo was far too reckless and brash. Then Midoriya Izuku turned around with steel in his eyes. The problem child had talked to him several times after classes, each time to confirm whether something would be stopped or counted against him by the teachers, like the 2 students from support and general studies he recruited, or the requisitions for permission to use firearms loaded with the RG-13 rounds, and the requisitions for a practical ammunition demonstration. Each time Midoriya looked more and more confident, more focused and determined. Then this morning, just after 2 a.m., the fucking problem child calls him and says that his team is ready to start. He showed up to see the entirety of the villain team perched on the walls and front steps of UA. For a split second, as they looked up at him, dressed to kill in suits and dresses, with armor and weapons stashed and ready. As Midoriya looked up and his eyes glinted green in the half-light, he pushed the memory of feeling in danger away. With nothing better to do, he let the villains in and watched them set up. The villains outfitted and stashed supplies in the 3 trucks, before half of them practically slept where they stood. Midoriya and 3 of his allies took a much more low-key sedan into the city proper to set up the villain lair, armed with suitcases and briefcases of supplies. Shoto, in turn, looked over the cameras. The entire city, every room, every street and back alley and sewer tunnel was hooked up to cameras. Those that were classified as public would be available to the heroes, but the villains would need to hack their own camera feeds to use them. Power Loader and Shoto had been very clear that while blocking out the hero team feed was fine, the teacher's connection was to be left untouched. As such, while the rest of the teachers filed in, finding places on couches and at the counter for the dry bar, Shoto panned through the cameras. He set half the screen on the resting villains, the other on the newly assembling heroes. Low mumbling started, before the heroes turned towards Principal Nedzu, dressed in a green money counter's cap. "All right, place your bets, folks, place your bets." The teachers called out bets and wagers. Some of them were cash, but others were offers of dealing with detentions or grading homework for one another. Shoto himself called out only one bet: 1 month of detention watching and homework covering, and 20,000 yen on the villain's breaking Endeavor's record win. Present Mike turned, mouth dropping. WHHATTT. SHOOUTTA. "You never." Shoto's red-eyed gaze cut off the rest of Yamada's tirade. "I placed my bet. Deal with it. Now shut up. The villain team is getting ready to move. With that, the teachers settled back into their seats. The first live stream started. Day 1 to 6 hours, 12 minutes. The teachers were chatting about the hunter team, mainly how they needed to be reorganized. The issue I'm seeing, Vlad King spoke up, is that for all the heroes' combined forces, each team is far too specialized for its role. It would have been better to plan for more varied teams, perhaps, but he also had only a short period to integrate each team with each other. This may be his opening gambit. It's possible that he will change team formations down the line, Ectoplasm responded. Look, they found the manhole, Cementos commented, pointing to the screen with the hunter team. I have to admit, I was impressed with the villain team's vanishing act. Carrying smaller travel platforms into the tunnels for the teams to reassemble was interesting and unexpected, though without the combined abilities of Honuki and Kendo to push the van into the office next door, they would have left quite the evidence as to where they went, Ectoplasm commented, leaning on the couch back. Though simply pulling a section of bricks out by softening the mortar holding them was inspiring. Shame the heroes never noticed that, Cementos noted, looking over a few stills from the concealment. They only noticed the manhole due to the antics of Tsunotori. They were lucky on that front, Shouta muttered, sipping at another juice pouch. Oh holy shit, look at the street. Ectoplasm leaned in, pulling up a new screen off his tablet. The heroes took in the barricade of cars, the limp bodies all too easy to imagine as injured and dead civilians. Look, is that Takoyami and Kiwaro? Power Loader looked at the two figures, now climbing up an upside-down car to the top of the wall and taking positions. And there's the hero team led by Bakugo, he remarked. Day 1 to 8 hours, 45 minutes. The screens were divided between the battle in the street, the hold-up at the government building, and the interiors of both places. Here, looks like the teams are closing in on 3 of the objectives. What 3? Nedzu tapped a controller, and 3 screens changed to show the items. In the bank vault, there is a safety deposit box with a fake skull, marked with the tag for the event and the number 12. In the government building, the left arm of a modded civil bot is marked as number 4. In the government building is a laptop marked with a 5. The civil bot also has to be taken intact. Hostage, espionage, and vault robbery. That's 3. The teachers continued to comment as they watched the side teams get to work. In the bank, Jiru Kaiuka, dressed in a black shirt, skirt, boots, and a red tie, slowly cracked the code to the vault. She was guarded and assisted by Monomanito for a short time before he hefted a bag and began to travel through the building, placing black objects on various walls and consistently referencing his phone for directions. In the government building, a swarm of rats and flies hunted for the laptop, lead and assisted by Kudakuji and Oase Yosutsu. Meanwhile, Yaoyorozu Momo and Aoyama Yuga tracked down and detained the civil bot. Yaoyorozu strapped it to a quickly created gurney as Aoyama began to take the bag he held and head for the basement. Videos of the subterranean crew, consisting of Honuki Juzu and Kendo Itsuka, showed them working together to craft escape tunnels, traveling from point to point in the city using the motorized platforms. At the same time, Yanagi Ryuko and Ashido Mina traveled along their own, more circuitous route. Ashido melted the way into locked power boxes and security feed lines, while Yanagi hooked up countless connectors from her bag to each, allowing another team, the villain leaders, to begin hacking every building security feed they could find. Yanagi also used her poltergeist powers to slowly lift smaller devices into small corners and into the streets through storm drains across the city. Day 1, 11 hours, 15 minutes. The duo guarding the bank retreated, with the villains carrying their objective through a new underground entrance and out into the tunnels, Monoma leaving one last attachment at the roof of the tunnel. The objectives at the government building were also almost completely collected. The location of the laptop already narrowed down to a single set of rooms the villains were rummaging through. Though Oase had jogged to the box truck, joined with Yaoyorozu as they hopped in the back. The teachers were interested but somewhat unenthused. Even the Dark Shadow and Black Quirk combo had only kept their interest for a short time. And while Power Loader seemed to realize what Monoma was doing, he had declined to share the information with the others. However, when Izuku's bong call began, Shouta could only smirk as the bank they had prepared to assault blew sky high. A round of curses and exclamations from all but Shouta, Nedzu, and Power Loader erupted. The fact that they were smirking was not unnoticed. What the hell, ha? Yamada cut off under a red stare, and Power Loader cut in. I spent a long afternoon talking construction and demolition charges in a quick certification class with both young Yaoyorozu and Monoma, and signed off on their use during this, along with a few other forms for extra equipment usage and materials. That's against the rules, isn't it? We weren't supposed to help the villains or hero. Snipe drawled from where he sat at the counter. They didn't mention the exam. They simply had me sign off for their certifications. I got an email from Nedzu a few hours later to sign off on use in the practical. They brought it up in the context of learning for the future. Okay, what the fuck? Came the yell from midnight. drawing everybody's attention to the massive truck-mounted artillery piece. I signed off on that too, Netsu commented in the sudden silence, only punctuated by the rat-a-tat of the gun firing and the violently cut-off scream from the purple-outfitted Minta. Ouch, Ectoplasm frowned, already sending one of his clones on standby at the edge of the city down to retrieve the kid from his red goo coffin and take him to Recovery Girl. That's gotta hurt. Little pervert fucking deserves it, came the mutter from Midnight, leaning back as the truck went careening down the road. Though, it feels like the end of the foreplay is coming up, she noted with a smirk. Day 1, 13 hours, 45 minutes. The teachers watched Bakugo's meeting with his team and his sorting of information. Then they watched the meeting with Izuku and the villains. In the end, they noted there were plenty of differences between the two. Midoriya is acting very social with them, like a concerned friend and leader for his troops. He made them food, and Bakugo, despite how his temper is more reined in, it's still making him curt and dismissive. That's a mistake, Hound Dog noted, watching as the villains dispersed. Then the surprise guest stepped out and the teachers were dumbfounded. Is this even allowed? All Might muttered, flipping through his book. The rules never said no, at least considering the circumstances, admitted Netsu, though I do admit, after this year we may have to refine those rules a bit more. On the screen, Izuku smiled before he paused and looked up. It took a few seconds for him to find it, but he gave a small nod to the camera, a knowing smirk dancing across his lips. Day 1, 17 hours and 42 minutes. Shit. Momo, Nito, Yuga, and Kayuka all looked at the case with a combination of focus and annoyance. Their target was sitting there, in the middle of the museum's grand showcase. A fucking coffin. Really? Kayuka called out. She was listening to the area, checking if they were in the clear. Yuga was with her in a silver and black outfit with a short red shoulder cape wrapped around him. His torso was covered with armor connected to the silver focusing array. The loose fabric and puffy sleeves looked somewhat French, with silver patterns that caught the light. Across from them, their companion team was wearing more risque outfits. Nito wore black sleek pants and boots, an open black vest, and a pair of black gloves, his head topped by a felt flat-topped cap. It made him look one part page boy, one part male stripper. Momo wore a sleek red backless dress and black thigh-highs, with an array of pouches across her hips. For shoes, she wore stylish black boots that reached her knees, leaving several inches of black satin stockings above them, before leaving a gap between her dress and the edge of the satin. The two were currently trying to spoof the case security for the exhibit. The coffin, emblazoned with the distinctive number 13 over the UA seal, rested in the center of a massive exhibit on zombies. Clearly a joke exhibit too, like the rest of them. The support class clearly built them for fun. We have less than 2 hours until the system swaps to a high-security lockdown for the night. But if we disturb the exhibit, then we're already fucked. Momo and Nito both made their way back. Well, good news. The coffin is unanchored. If we get it, we can just carry it out. The issue is the motion sensors. If anything else gets disturbed, it triggers an alarm. If the glass shatters, it triggers an alarm. If the laser grid over the coffin is set off, it triggers an alarm, Momo explained, already texting the data they had gathered to Hacker and the tower. Seriously, what about having Hacker turn off the alarms? A beep preceded May's voice over the comms. I wish I could, but this is definitely older students at work. It's awesome, but several of these tricks I don't have counters for. First off, the alarm uses what's referred to as an interrupt system. If you break the circuit or interrupt the signal, 3 separate receivers go set the alarm off. If one of the receivers goes offline, the other 2 set the alarm off. I can't disable it from here. If I was there, I might be able to delay it, but no dice. Kayuka, Momo, and Nito stared at the display. It was 5 meters on the side and a little under a meter tall. The area was covered in a massive pile of gravestones and fake zombie pieces behind glass. In the center was the coffin. Yuga tapped the base of the display and then tilted his head. Kayuka looked down and listened as he tapped again. That's hollow, she thought. If we can't go over because of the lasers, or through due to the motion sensors, can we go under? Yuga asked, looking at the case with a critical eye. The other 3 paused and Yuga grinned, opening the panel carefully to reveal a smooth wooden surface under the exhibit. Momo, Nito, you have laser pointers in your repertoire. A few minutes later they were set. Momo and Nito marked off the exact lines of where the box was, using the lasers to show it across the underside of the box. With careful hands, Yuga marked off the square with a marker, then had them recheck his measurements as he stared at the underside of the case. He was handed a knife, and Kayuka popped the corners with careful taps of her ear jacks. All right, start nice and slow, Sparkle, we have time. He nodded and took the chisel-shaped knife up, digging it through the wood slowly. He had the better part of an hour to get through this and didn't want to mess it up. Izuku looked at the screen as the feed from the 4-man team came through. The team was working well, though this was a far more intensive theft than he had originally planned. He glanced at the diagram of the building. Behind him, Mezu napped on the couch, hat over his face to keep the light from the holo screens from waking him. Izuku began to pace, hand over his mouth to muffle his mumbling. 17 floors, with the top 3 being a massive amphitheater and museum where the team was currently pulling their heist. The only reason they were getting away with this was the fact they had already ordered the museum closed earlier that day. They had hacked the system and sent a museum closing message over the civil bot network. However, the system itself ran off a radio-updated internal clock and as such couldn't be hacked to keep the museum closed. The result, a 3-hour window where the teams could get in, get the goods, and get out. Izuku zoomed out and looked at the picture of the building once again. The triangular window scheme was nice, but the sphere of triangular panels made the massive glass dome of the top seem almost like a disco ball. He tabbed through some of his different camera's feeds, finally settling on a mixed display of the crew at the museum and the exterior of the hero agency. For the better part of half an hour, he watched the crew work on getting into the case without setting the alarms off, and then things went wrong. Yuga scored the line once more and then there was a cracking sound, an entire side suddenly shifting and pulling away from the boards. "Shit, hold it straight," Kyoyuka called out. Yuga already pushing up to try and keep the board steady, but it was too late. With a creak, part of the board beneath the coffin dipped and the coffin went crashing through the rest of the exhibit. A beat, panic already setting in. Then the alarms went off. Metal shutters dropped over the doorways throughout the museum, and the elevators rose up and locked into place on the top floor. Shit, Nito and Momo rushed the display. With the alarm already off, they just needed to grab the coffin and bail, and Yuga rolled out from under the display with a grimace of self-reproach. They reached it and lifted the dark metal case, dragging it forwards, while Kyoyuka was already tapping her comm. "Tower, we have a fucking problem." The sun's last light of the day was making the sky burn like fire and Izuku cursed, adjusting the holograms as he tried to keep track of what was happening. Izuku swore, kicking back to jar the couch and jolt Mezu awake as his eyes tracked data and images of the heroes rushing through the doors, already oriented and heading for the museum. Head count: Ida, Kirishima, Tetsu, Kaminari, Ajiro, Bondo, and Tsunotori. Led by Bakugo. That's a heavy assault team. Could I send a team too? No time. Mezu, get prepped for a fight and get Hacker and Con Man up and ready. The museum job just went south. Mezu took a second to process the words before he rolled off the couch, standing and stretching as he headed for the door. Have Hacker get the rifle. Grab your gear and get going. I'll meet you at the tunnel. Izuku was already connecting the system to the HUD in his gesture mask, tapping the connection and considering times. 17 floors at average, 30 seconds a floor, so say 8 minutes. The museum is locked. They need to get out. Tapping the comms on, Izuku started relaying orders, moving to the elevator while a monochrome green screen on the mask lenses showed the camera feeds. Yuga, laser the gates between you and the exits. Keep them in short bursts, as much as you can handle without going over. Momo, Nito, casters and webbings on the coffin, make it easier to carry. Drop down 4 floors. Floor 13 has the first set of offices through the stairwell. Move now. You have less than 5 minutes before the hero teams hit the building. Hide out there as long as you can. The heroes are probably rushing the top floor first. Kyoyuka, you're on watch and keep the line open. My team and I are coming to provide a distraction to get you out. Keep your focus and use your heads. Roger, came 4 voices. Tapping the mic, Izuku stepped into the elevator, tapping the basement button as he scowled under his mask. Great, this is going to be a mess, he muttered. 4 days before the exam, Midoriya stood inside as he looked down at the form of Nito, who cradled a broken arm. Yeah, that's what happens. Figures. Head out to recovery, girl. You're done for today and we know you can't handle my quirk at all, even now. Fucking oh, Midoriya. You put up with this during the tournament. Nito panted, looking up with a wild look in his eyes. Midoriya rubbed his wrist and looked thoughtful, unknowingly displaying the white scarred flesh and twisted fingers of his final clash with Todoroki in the ring. Yeah, I did. A lot worse than what you've got now. The damage you have is diffused, spread out. Doing it in a smaller space hurts more and deals loads more damage. For a moment, Monoma Nito could only look on in awe at the absent-minded way Izuku explained how he hurt himself. All right, grab Miracle Matter on your way out and recheck the distance you can hold it, please. Izuku was already turning away, sketching out notes in his book as he glanced at the other villain teams testing their powers. Miracle Matter? Monoma inquired, raising an eyebrow as Izuku blushed. Oh, sorry, I meant Creati. Go grab Creati. Izuku shook his head and moved over to look at the others. Nito looked back down, seeing the dark purple bruising that wrapped his arm from wrist to elbow. As he tagged Yaoyorozu and borrowed her quirk, he felt at his arm. Honestly, it hurt. He's had broken bones. But even now, 10 minutes after it broke, he felt a deep throbbing ache through his arm. But that was nothing compared to the rush of power. It felt like he had stood in a tunnel as the ocean crashed through him. With one last look at the scarred figure of his kingpin, Nito headed to Recovery Girl. Day 1, 18 hours, 55 minutes. Kirishima, Tetsu, take the ground floors up. Bondo, you run support with them. Seal off areas as you pass. Ada, Anjiro, Tsunotori, take the west stairwell to the museum floors. Lock it down and figure out what they were after. Then start searching from the top down. Me and Sparky here will head to the center floors and then clear up to meet you. Then we'll all double back down to meet the ground team. Go. Katsuki barked orders as his team closed in on the building. After nods and muttered agreement, the teams hit the building lobby at a run. Bondo fired a quick stream of Semidine across the elevator bank before he followed the rest of his team through the grand doors into the ground floor. The other teams headed for their stairwells. Ada took the stairs 3 at a time, engines pumping and steps sure as he raced. Ajiro simply leaped from railing to railing, zigzagging up the stairwell center towards the top, joined by Tsunotori. She would leap several floors, land, and then leap several more. On the other stairwell, Bakugo and Kaminari were forced to take a more mundane route. They ran the stairs 2 at a time as they raced for the 7th floor to begin their chase. Far above, a pale blonde-haired boy sighed and tossed a can attached to a small blasting cap, a long line of string and a wireless trigger over the railing. The string quickly pulled tight, the line tied off on the lower railing of the staircase. Bombs away. Nito grinned, then turned back and helped maneuver the coffin through the doors onto floor 13. Across from him, Momo was turning and placing a second prepped cannon cord set up on the ceiling, attached by a strip of duct tape from her pocket. Move it, assholes. We've got to get set up. Kyoyuka whispered at the 2 creators as Yuga pulled the leading edge of the coffin through doors and into a high-rise office. King to Acquisitions Squad. Defend your floor and keep the elevators intact. We're arriving through the tunnels in 4 minutes. Hold off until then. Hacker suggests compound 6 on the doors and support structures to reinforce. Hold out on the far side from the elevator banks and clear an arena in the center. Feel free to trap the halls from the stairs. Understood, King, Kyoyuka replied, already moving to begin. Tenya broke into the museum entrance first and started a search of the floor, looking for messed up exhibits, broken glass or signs of a struggle. He found it easy, as there was a straight path of molten metal grates leading through the hallways. Following them, he found and marked 7 variant civil bots, their outfits and painted decorations marking them as fake security guards. Each of them had holes punched through heads or necks. He quickly compared them to memory and tapped his comms. Alert. 2 intruder identities suggested from damage in the museum location. Jiro Kyoyuka and Aoyama Yuga. He looked around before adding, whatever they took was from the zombie exhibit. Looks like it was a centerpiece. Got it. Glasses for brains. Take a look around for a minute then start down. Sparky and I are almost at floor 9. Shitty hair, steel hair, you 2 find anything? Ooh, not yet, Bakubro. Most of the lower floors are just conference rooms and cubicle cells so far. We've got Bondo sealing up the main exits as we go and he's got the elevator banks done. We're finishing the 2nd floor now. Hurry it up. Ada, get a move on. Understood. He disconnected and then turned to his team, who had been following along. Ajiro, start from the central room, check the upper balcony. Tsunotori, clear where you can on this floor and then guard the door. I'll start on the computers, set up an uplink to HQ so we can access the feeds. Denki jogged through the floor, eyes roaming as he searched. Bakugo had gone the far way around the floor. Each step sent small sparks across his skin and lights flickering brighter as he passed. Next fucking floor, came the order as he and Bakugo regrouped at the stairs, heading up once more. They rushed up the steps and Denki saw Bakugo flinch and start to turn. He turned with him, eyes barely making out something swaying in the center of the stairwell. Then he heard a beep and a bang. He felt himself get smacked with something wet and rubbery, reflexively covering his face and closing his eyes. Long, thin lines of something unknown wrapped around and clung to his skin and clothes. SHITFUCKER. Well, Bakugo sounded pissed. No surprise. Denki opened his eyes and looked around. The section of the stairwell and the next floor, both above and below, was lined with sticky green threads that reminded Denki of a spider web from hell. The feeling was reaffirmed as he tried to pull at it and it simply stuck and started to set across his limbs. A few steps up, he heard a small explosive bang, and a set of lines fell free to tangle in the web in the center of the stairwell. Motherfucking bullshit. A click and then, glasses be on the lookout for fucking traps. Canister about 4 centimeters across and 10 tall. Had a blasting cap on it. Filled the stairwell down here with gunk for a good 10 fucking meters across Q. We're stuck for a bit until I can blow a hole through without breaking the goddamn staircase. As he spoke, Denki focused and began to channel a charge through the strands closest to him, slowly making them crack and sizzle before some of them popped, falling off his body. The conversation with Ida cut out, and the 2 of them started forwards, Bakugo blowing the strands away and Denki frying them. I can still hear Bakugo and Kaminari at the lower edge of my range. The trap worked and they're stuck for a bit. Ida and his team are getting ready to come down the west stair door in less than a minute, Kyoka called out, looking at the rest of the team. Nito and Momo were just about finished setting up traps. Both of them were making a second cylinder trap in the other stairwell above the door. The substance they sprayed across the door itself was a compound May had come up with after seeing Bondo's Semidine in action. As a quick-drying bonding agent, it would form a thin layer of resin across the doors, practically freezing against the material and keeping them supported against impact. A quick layer of extension bars were screwed into the frame that kept the doors secured and then got resin glued to the back of the doors. Meanwhile, both Yuga and Kyoka had cleared the cubicles back. A quick laser burst on a low setting, cutting some pieces in half as they, also with a bottle of Compound 6, sprayed and crafted a quick set of fortifications out of the cubicle remains. They had 3 points of security, one simple foxhole at the end of each hall from the stairwells and a larger one backed against the private offices at the far side of what was once sea of cubicles. As the creative duo fell back, Kyoka pulled a simple handgun from her pack and 3 clips of RG-13 rounds. Yuga did the same and the others pulled their own skeletonized versions out of their gear, clipping parts together as their guns took shape. Kyoka could call them all smaller handguns, based on what video games have taught her. She also knew that they were fired using a compressed air cartridge with a red goo payload on the end, spent CO2 cartridges getting kicked out the chamber. Boss, contact incoming. We're almost there. Hold out for 2 minutes more and be ready to move. We'll try, she said, pointing for Momo to trigger the doorway charges. Fuck, came echoing up from one stairway, while a squeal of disgust came from the other. Hurry, boss. They're at the doors. Recipro burst. And with that, the doors began to cave in. Izuku adjusted the long, loose jacket he wore over his suit, emphasizing his thin figure and making him seem taller. The short lifts on his boots also assisted with that illusion. To his right, in an identical jacket, Con Man matched his pace. Assault took his left, his form all but concealed beneath the broad brim of his hat and the massive, loose high-collar navy blue coat he wore like a cape. As he got to the maintenance room, he looked at the controls, knowing Hacker could see them through his masked cameras. He plugged her thumb drive into the security computer, the civil bot that had been sitting there quickly bearing Assault's handprint 4 inches deep in its face, sparks flying before it could react and alert the hero team. In the meantime, Izuku stepped away and popped the cover of the breakers for the building off with a flick of full cowl through his fingers. He looked at the array of switches. Which breakers? Top left, flip up. Bottom center, flip down, same to the bottom left. Center is lighting and main power. I need it turned off in the far left, flip to full to keep the elevators on. Izuku followed the instructions. Con Man and Assault were standing next to the main elevator with arms crossed, until with a click, the elevator button beeped. Elevators coming down. Cameras say that Kiri, Tetsu, and Bondo are about to hit the 5th floor. Baku and Kami are pushing up the stairwell to the east, and are close to the mess at the door. Ada and his team are almost through the web bomb outside their door, however, and are nearly in. A beat passed, Izuku lowering his head, and mouth moving near silently as he thought. He took a slow breath and he looked up, eyes gleaming under the brim of his hat. All right, here's how we're going to play it. 4 days before the exam. Izuku was a teenager and his room reflected that. Besides the overwhelming hero worship, he had an array of clutter across his room most of the time. But with the last few days of surprise exercise reveals and choosing teams, his desk had become cluttered to a new level. A notebook with his team's quirks was sitting on it, each page cross-referenced with possible combinations and tricks. His laptop was set up beside it, the screen filled with basic blueprints and a few hundred tabs with various research papers and theories. Aside from that, there was also a large map of the fake city pinned to the wall, graciously procured by May from the school's servers. He had spent time mapping out the tallest buildings and points of interest. Bank, museum, government offices, hero offices. The tallest building was marked on the blueprints as a landmark, which means there was something going on there. Izuku himself was sketching his latest revamped villain outfit design into his notebook. His laptop tabbed to a new window as he played highlights of old movies. Movies where villains were one of the main characters. Old superhero movies were a good start. Even 200 years later, the 32-part MCU was still a good watch. Besides that, he watched some true classics. The Godfather series, the entire gamut of Ocean's 11 movies. He looked through fan breakdown videos about Magneto, Loki, the Joker, and many more. On his desk was a smaller black book, marked with black ink and red crossouts, notes on how villains acted, on what they did right, and writing on how they inflicted fear and made their enemies flinch away. He would have to make an impression. He had to hit the morale and minds of the heroes hard and fast, plant the idea that he is in command. Explosives, fire, and collateral damage. I have to make the entire city a war zone. I have to take control. For the first time, the villain's smile came effortlessly to his face. Day 1, 19 hours, 12 minutes. Izuku looked around the 4th floor. Next, and let's hurry. It sounds like they need us upstairs soon. Got it, Tetsu called, already jogging over, followed by the hulking and eerily mute form of Bondo. They rushed up the stairs, hearing the faint sound of repetitive slams from the top floor echoing down the concrete tube to them. Izuku really did want to go and help, to give a good showing, but Bakugo had been determined. Clear the floors so there are no surprises. Which, to be fair, the villains have offered a lot of surprises. With that thought, the heroes entered the 5th floor. Almost immediately, there was a change. Every floor before this had been fairly similar. Lights, cubicles, a neat arrangement of offices, and tasteful artwork. The lights on the 5th floor were off. The team slowed and both Izuku and Tetsu triggered their quirks, while behind them Bondo shifted his stance, more cementine guiling up in his maw as he readied himself for combat. Suddenly, a light turned on across the office. Let's go, Tetsu cried, rushing. Izuku ran at his side as they crashed through cubicles towards the lights. Bondo, giving a deep rumbling sound as he staggered and followed after them, stumbled and twisted to get through the mangled mess of cubicles left in the wake of the harder duo. They crashed through the cubicles, throwing the last few to the side as they stared at the lit office. There, sitting at the desk in the glass-walled corner office, was Midoriya. But in front of him, leaning on the door to the office, was a figure who made them pause. Long black suit jacket, a green tie and black vest matching Midoriya's down to the red leather shoes and red gloves of his outfit. A black, full-head mask with a solid, featureless black void, with the exception of a faintly glowing green question mark. Welcome, heroes. Sadly, your player 3 has another game to play. Assault, if you would, the man with the mask said, voice distorted but clear. There were rapid footsteps and then a crash, making both Izuku and Tetsu flinch and half turn back. A massive, blue coat-wrapped form with a wide-brimmed tan hat slammed into Bondo from the depths of the cubicles and sent him crashing into the maze of office supplies. But enough about him. You two gentlemen are mine to deal with. Both turned back, crouching and raising fists, radiating righteous aggression. Let's go. First, the pleasantries, he called, holding up his hands in a non-threatening manner. I go by the name Con Man. And yourselves? I'm Red Riot, Kirishima shouted. And I'm Real Steel, Tetsu echoed. And then, everything just began to fade away, leaving one last line echoing through their memories. And you both lost the game. Thanks for playing, heroes. Mezu stood panting as the immobilized form of Bondo laid on the floor, pinned by a toppled cubicle. His head was stuck in a trash can, keeping him from spewing his cementine quirk across the office. Con Man approached Assault and stood at his side. The sound of Izuku's rapid steps came up behind them. As they stepped to the side, he moved between them, pulling a larger caliber gun from his jacket and firing twice, once at the bucket, once at the chest of the glue quirk user. Sorry, Bondo, but you're too useful to let Bakugo keep. Gentlemen, let's move. We have an appointment with our pals upstairs to attend to. Con, was auto-defenestration really necessary? No, but it was funny as all hell. The distorted voice carried a clear tone of amusement. Good point. Assault, you good. Kingpin turned to his left-hand man. Bondo was strong but aside from a few bruises, nothing major, Mezu stated, already adjusting his coat to hang correctly once more. Good. Kingpin approached the elevator. It opened. Thank you, hacker. 13th floor if you would. As the three stepped inside and turned to face the doorway once more, they got one last view of the destroyed offices, including the two gaping holes of shattered glass on either side of the corner office. Izuku took off his mask and hat and looked at them. The doors slid closed with a soft ding. 1 minute, 30 seconds earlier. Shit, Kyoyuka cursed, ducking back as Ida and Tsunotori finally shattered their way through the door, taking out the frame in the process. Less than a second later, she was back up around the corner, the rapid click hiss of her gun matched by Momo's as she leaned over the other corner of the hallway. The soft crack pop of the red goo splattering against the remains of the threshold echoed as Ida, Anjiro, and Tsunotori dove for cover. Fuck off, heroes. We're sorta busy up here. Foul villains, you will cease your ways and surrender to the authorities. You have no escape, Ida called back before he zigzagged down the hallway, diving into another doorway. Red spatters painted the frame behind him. Fuck off, Kyoyuka repeated, sending another round through the threshold and making Anjiro flinch back. As she stepped back and reloaded, Momo stepping out to fire, she whispered into her comm. Boss, what's the holdup? Just a moment, we're almost done now. The sound of shattering glass came over the comms. Never mind, we're done. Up in a bit. Kyoyuka slammed the new mag into place and stepped around, firing off more rounds as Momo took a turn to reload. Anjiro was pulling the beat and battered steel door back towards him with his tail. That was the problem. Die, you shitty door. Correction, that was the problem. Sacker Blue. Monsieur Paragon is already at the port. Fuck, fall back. Momo and Kyoyuka made a break for it, with Yuga and Nito following suit across the room. All four raced for the half-built fort across the room. the girls sending potshots at the corner they had just occupied. With a bang, the other stairwell door went flying, shattered resin and broken rods still dragging the stone framework with it across the room. It shattered the glass wall of an office along the way. Crouched behind the barricade, they watched as Bakugo, hands popping and crackling, walked around the corner. The sheer malice coming from his stance made the villains pause, which let the other 4 heroes stack up on the corners, ready to act. You're all under arrest. Now we can do this the easy way and you surrender. Or the fucking hard way as I rip you apart. Ding. A pause, and the entire floor felt their gazes be drawn to the slowly sliding doors of the elevator surrounded by the heroes. Red leather boots laced up past the ankle and polished to a shine stepped through the entrance. Pitch black slacks rose under a long black coat of the same color. Hands clad in skin-tight gloves, the same color as his shoes, clasped in front of him. The jacket parted to reveal a black vest, a bright white shirt, and a perfectly tied green tie. Above it sat a grinning mask of black on white and a low black-brimmed hat with 2 feathers rising from each side, each a bright acid green to complement his hair and tie. To the left of him, his 2 comrades stepped in, the matching outfit and hidden identity of con man slouching slightly, more disheveled at his side, with a looser tie and hat lopsided over his identity-concealing mask. The mountain in the navy trenchcoat known as Assault flanked the other side. A voice, obviously enhanced with a microphone to be clear, based on the slight distortion, spoke. "How about my way, Kakin?" he said, voice chipper and upbeat as the kingpin tilted his head. Mezu looked on as his boss pulled yet another flashy play, drawing all the attention, getting everyone and everything in the room to look at one single person. Kingpin reveled in the attention, standing tall and proud, his focus solely on Bakugo. It truly looked like a fight for the ages was approaching. "Deku," Bakugo began before freezing, face falling blank. Which is exactly what the boss wanted. "Go jump out the window, you stupid motherfucker." The voice behind the mask was muffled, but the distortion was gone. And it wasn't Midoriya Izuku giving the order. Reaching up, as Bakugo turned and sprinted at the nearest unobstructed window, the mask came off, revealing tired purple eyes and a drawn face. Then the hat and a curly green wig also came off, revealing deep purple spikes as Shinsu Hitoshi took in his work with a smile. With the shattering of glass, the biggest fighting asset on the hero team was removed from play. "Good job, con man. That was easier than expected." With a flicker of green sparks across his skin, the figure wearing the con man question mask stepped forwards. Yanking off his mask and trading with Hitoshi for his hat back was Midoriya Izuku, the actual kingpin, whose side Shoji had never left. "Let's do this." Before the words were out of Izuku's mouth, Mezu was already on the move. The lower 2 arms reached into the folds of his jacket and with 2 long smooth draws, the red goo equivalent of double-barrel shotguns came forth. One swung up, already sighting on the panicky sparking mess that was Kaminari as his eyes widened. The other aimed at Ida's team's general direction. With 2 pulled fingers, the gun popped with the sound of compressed gases. Kaminari barely had time to respond before he was covered across the legs and up his left-hand side, screaming in surprise and pain as the force knocked him down and back. On the other side, Ida's team dove for cover, Ajiro ducking behind the battered security door for safety as his team split to either side of the corridor. "Acquisition squad, bring me the coffin, if you would be so kind." "Assault, give them a few hands," Izuku called as, with a flash of full cowl, he kicked the remains of the first barricade on the side where Ida had come from, slamming the broken and modified cubicle mess into a surprised Ajiro and sending him flying back down the hall. Kyoika and Momo stepped back to the corner and unloaded as Mezu stepped forwards and grabbed the coffin by the netting, pulling 2 straps over his shoulders and dragging the coffin like an oversized suitcase to the elevator. The distant sounds of explosions rang out from the window as the villains rushed into the small box. As the doors started to close, Ida's scream commands and the sound of explosions heralded Bakugo's rocket-powered entrance to the floor. "Going down," came Hacker's voice over the intercom. Before the doors shut and with a lurch, the elevator dropped faster than it was designed to. Bakugo stared at the closed door and the number above it, which was ticking down fast. "Head to the basement." Bakugo called to the still-dazed team left upstairs, before turning and diving back out the broken window. He flared his wrist out, using a blast to accelerate towards the ground and counting the seconds. At 2 seconds to impact, he flipped around and used multiple rapid explosions to cut his descent from violent suicide to dropping off a short roof and crouching on contact. He instantly stood up and ran. How had he forgotten the basement? Yeah, he had thought the elevators were locked down, but apparently not. As he slammed through the doors into the first floor, he booked it for the employees-only door next to the stairwell. He was betting, stairs to the basement for maintenance. He burst through them just as he heard a ding from further down, leaping the stairwell to land on the next landing and shoulder-checking the door with an explosive assist. The area was clear, but the sound of footsteps came from the other door across the way. A charge and another explosion was enough to get through the door. And there, no mask, not having put it back on yet, following behind his team as they filed out through the end of a long tunnel, stood the person he most wanted to annihilate. "Deku, you piece of shit," he called, making Midoriya slow to a stop. The other villains started to turn, but he waved them on, before turning back. "Hi, Kaken." 7 days before the exam, Izuku held up his oldest notebook and looked over one of his earliest entries. There, after his mother and her quirk, on pages 3 and 4, his younger self had shakily written Bakugo Katsuki. Kaken was a constant for years. His profile showed up in each edition, always with more detail and proposed limitations and strengths, each time showing up with new sections, analysis of personality, analysis of fighting style, of words not to say and things not to do. Some of them were on how to avoid Kaken. But now he was ready to fight back. He pulled out a new, black notebook. Under the cover, he wrote something simple, plus ultra, and on the first page, he started writing about how to win. It all started with Bakugo Katsuki. Day 1, 19 hours, 22 minutes. "Deku, you piece of shit." The yell echoed down the gray stone corridor, the fluorescent lighting and exposed panels above them belying that they were in a service corridor. "Hi, Kaken. You know, I was hoping Con Man's orders would work to keep you busy for a while longer." Izuku turned, eyes cold as he looked at Bakugo down the corridor. He reached up and adjusted his hat slightly. Behind him, the villains dragged the coffin through the doors, several of them shooting worried glances at their leader. With the tensing of his fists, the sound of crackling fireworks filled the room. Bakugo tensed and readied for the fight. "I'm going to end this fucking exercise. Right here, right now," Bakugo growled, hand flashing out and sending a burst of light and sound echoing through the corridor. A flashbang, designed to daze and confuse. Bakugo was testing the waters. With a shrug and a spin, the suit jacket intercepted the explosion, muffling it but leaving the cloth jacket smoldering and in tatters. At the end of the corridor, Izuku tilted his head, eyes traveling from the cloth to Bakugo, before he gently tossed it and let it land at the base of the cement wall to the side. Izuku began to fold the sleeves of his white button-up shirt up, cuffing them above his elbows to reveal the scarred skin and tight muscle. His forearms were already crackling with faint lines of green and red as one for all pulsed through him. "Really? You think that you can take me? Right here, right now?" Izuku mocked, before reaching out a hand to the wall and slamming his fist through a glass-covered red metal trigger. He yanked down, all but ripping it from the wall, the motion etched with a glimmer of green energy. "Let's see it, then." The ring of a fire alarm triggered, and with a hiss the sprinklers lining the hall burst to life. With a growl, Bakugo realized what the play was. Mixing his sweat with the water would weaken his explosions. The near rain in the corridor would chill them both, lessening the sweat he could output regardless. That meant he only had 2 heavy blasts, the stored sweat and the gauntlets. He either had to lead with that or save them for a surprise down the fight. He chose to lead. He rushed forwards, getting closer. In response, Izuku rushed back. His face and arms crackled with a faint aura of tightly regulated power, water streaming off his stupid hat as they neared each other. The two met with roars of effort and a flash of power. Ada all but staggered down the last of the stairs, looking around. The fire alarm was going off, for some reason, and he could barely hear over it. A battered Anjiro and a focused Tsunotori were trailing as he looked around, reaching up to tap his comm. "HQ, come in. This is Ada." "HQ, come in. This is HQ." "Ada, are you okay? I'm getting crazy signals from the security system of the building. I got those feeds you wanted. Is something on fire?" The slightly nervous ramblings of Kodai came over the comms. "I don't know. But listen, get the others on watch moving and wake up someone to watch the monitors. They need to get here, now." "Kingpin is here," Ada spoke tersely, already running around and trying to listen for the faint sounds of explosion. "We need backup. Now, on our way," Kodai confirmed, the sounds of her moving from the console coming through before she cut the connection. "Anjiro, look for the lower floor team. I doubt Kirishima and Tetsu went down easy. Tsunotori helped me find a way down." The two leaders lashed out. Fists and weakened explosive blasts slammed against the walls as the two once friends, now enemies, fought. Splashes of water were kicked up with each step. The snap and hum of superpowered blows being exchanged filled the air with each dodge and parry. The clanging explosions and the pulse of green lights pushed each block. Connecting fists moved faster and faster and faster. All of these things marked the anthem of their fight. Midoriya ducked around a right, catching Katsuki's arm and twisting, slamming him face first into the wall. Katsuki swore and spun back out of the grip, arms scraping along the wall as he twisted and swung his left grenade gauntlet, aiming at Deku. With a shout, he set his stance to hold against the recoil and pulled the trigger. "Die shitty Daku." He glanced up and saw Midoriya lunge, not away but towards Katsuki, hat held in hand as he brought it down on the nozzle of the gauntlet. The explosion blew them both back. After a few seconds to regain his footing, Katsuki looked down. Where his gauntlet had once been now stood only cracked metal wreckage attached to the armored bracer which had protected his wrist. He looked up, watching the quickly dissipating smoke around Midoriya as the green-haired kingpin stepped through the curtains of water provided by the sprinklers. The hat he held in his hand smoked, the feathers nothing but ragged tufts, yet the hat itself was intact. It had taken his strongest explosion full force without tearing apart. I really do have to thank Hacker for this. She came up with a material resilient enough to redirect your explosions. Deku gave a bloody grin and set his hat back on his head, water running down his face from his green hair, strands plastered to his face. There was a second of stillness, both of them tensing to fight before with a flicker of green Izuku gotten close. The two once more traded blows back and forth, but with only one gauntlet left and soaked to the bone by the sprinklers, Katsuki was practically quirkless. A series of jabs to his arms and shoulders left him gasping. Midoriya ducked low, kicking out Katsuki's footing before shoulder-checking him to the ground. As Katsuki tried to reorient himself and get his breath back, he found himself pinned, the right half of his face submerged in the pooling water. Deku's knee was in the center of his lower back and his gauntleted arm was painfully twisted up and back, leaving him panting and spitting water as he tried to catch his breath. You know, I find the irony here almost cathartic. The soft voice of Deku came to him. Not because you're the hero and I the villain, but because this exercise has proven something I've always believed. Katsuki twisted and struggled as he set off as large an explosion as he could. He rolled to the side and up into a crouch, arms coming up on reflex up to block a flickering green knee that shoved him up to his feet. What do you fucking know? A snapped right hook slammed into Katsuki's cheek, sending him staggering across the hall before he came back. His fists swung in heavy haymakers as he tried to shut Deku up. I know that you are obsessed with being number one. I know you think that heroism is a competition, that being the best means something. Katsuki screamed and lashed out, making Deku stagger back, a bruise forming on one bloodied cheek. He spun around with the hit and came back to a slam of a glowing foot into a hastily raised guard. It sent Katsuki staggering back once more. Being number one, it never mattered in the same way to me. I appreciate the title, the meaning behind the words. Katsuki raised his remaining arm cannon, trying to aim through the blood stinging his eyes, but Midoriya was already in close. He kicked the cannon out to the side as he choke-slammed the blonde into the wall. For the first time, they stood eye to eye, face to face since the start of the exercise. Blood-red eyes bored into glowing acid-green ones. Not Paragon and Kingpin, black and white. No, Deku and Kaken stared into each other's eyes, both locked in a struggle. There are heroes and there are villains. That's the fight you should worry about. Number 1. It's a joke. A public opinion piece ran by gossip magazines that worry more about sales than merit. I'd rather be a symbol of peace, Deku said, voice soft, private. Before Katsuki could even consider a response, Deku reached out, yanking his still gauntleted arm cannon down the hallway back towards the museum building and pulled the trigger with a swift motion. Across the entrance to the tunnel, a wall of ice caught the shot, shattering because of the blast. Midoriya stepped back and Katsuki swayed forwards, breathing deep and coughing from the chokeslam. He looked over the arm monitors, cursing as she directed the acquisition squad through the tunnels to the drop-off for the coffin. Mezu was with them moving the coffin, but Larceny and Conman had both stayed back to wait for Izuku. In the meantime, she looked at the rifle next to her, cursing the fact that Izuku had told her not to shoot anyone who wasn't on the target of opportunity list. Beyond that, Ajiro had finally gotten Kirishima out of the car he had been entombed in, and they were both helping to pull Tetsu out from the half-meter deep hole he caused in the pavement. She had sent a warning to Izuku about the backup team of heroes but hadn't had a chance in hell to stop them. Not with Todoroki there. Regardless, all she could do now was grit her teeth and hope that Izuku could pull out a win. The fight so far had sounded and looked brutal over the security monitors. She could only imagine how the teachers were reacting. The green lightning-laced Spartan kick sent Bakugo flying back down the hallway, only to be caught by the combined efforts of Shishida and Fukudashi, while beside them Shizaki and Tsunotori readied to fight. Yet the biggest threat to Izuku stood before the cluster of heroes. Todoroki stood next to Ada, both of them tense. Down the hall, Izuku chuckled before standing up straight. Gently, his hands reached up to touch his bleeding lip and poke at the bruise across his jaw. His eyes were focused on the heroes. Well, 6 on 1, 7, if Bakugo still counts, but considering how soaked he is, gonna say not. Fuck off Deku, Bakugo choked out, before falling into a coughing fit, holding his neck. And the bruised throat, can't forget that. Izuku nodded amicably. Surrender now, Kingpin. You cannot escape, Ada thundered, the statement backed by a rumble of engines and a tense stance. Beside him, Todoroki swirled with traces of fire as ice wreathed the ceiling, sealing off the sprinklers. Izuku chuckled but hit a wince. Bakugo hit hard and he was now sporting a few aching ribs and jaw. Not to mention his knuckles were bruised and swelling from the punches against the grenade gauntlets. The gloves had helped, but these weren't the special ones for Kaken. He eyed them, options from what he had ready rolling through his mind. He didn't know how many of his backups or prepared plans were even close to ready, and his earpiece was missing. Lost in the fight, most likely. It was looking more and more like he was going to have to bluff or connive his way. "Excuse me, boss." A flash of blonde showed Monomanito, codename Larceny, stepping forwards, hand already resting on Izuku's shoulder. "Sorry about this, boss, but your taxi is waiting and you are far too important to lose here." At that moment, green met gray. Izuku realized that Larceny had touched the side of his neck. Wait, LARCE. With a glowing surge of green and silver lightning, Izuku was lifted and sent flying back through the tunnel to the entrance to the underground, only to be roughly caught by the slim form of Con Man. Izuku's eyes were panicked, green staring out with glowing fire. "See ya, boss. Stay safe." "Yeah." Nito grinned back down the hall at Izuku, throwing his boss a wink before the door started to close. "Wait, fuck, NEITOOO," echoed his voice as the doors slammed shut. Nito bit off a hiss, looking at his now broken left arm. It was quickly turning black and blue from the damage. He turned to look at the heroes, who were standing there in shock. Nito chuckled, though the pain made the sound sharp and shaky. "Well, I still have an arm, so let's see if I can copy my boss. Yeah, 2 for 2. Todoroki was already widening his eyes as Nito drew his arm back, taking aim down the hallway at the heroes. A quick rush of ice was thrown up and the heroes stepped back and started to brace themselves, ice forming thick walls and rushing down the corridor towards him. "You know what our teachers say." Nito grinned, green light surging down his arm. "Go beyond. Plus, ultra." Nito swung in a full body motion forwards and roared. He unleashed a punch aimed not at, but above the heroes, at the ceiling and into the lobby of the skyscraper. He watched the water around him turn into mist in the shockwave's pressure, walls cracking from the edge of the force. The ceiling shattered under the force of the hit, caving out and away from the source of the pressure. Then the pain hit and he blacked out for a few seconds, trying to cradle his broken arms as the pain consumed him. A beat, anywhere from a few seconds to half a minute. Nito blinked to clear the tears from his eyes, looking out and up at the ruins of the lobby. The angled, several-meter-thick ice wall that had been built to shield the heroes quickly began to have a hole melted through it. Above them, the concrete ceiling had been shattered and pushed back, the floor of the lobby bucking and bursting through the front door, the associated lobby wall and a good portion of the neighboring second-story wall. Even through the night, Nito could see that the windows across the street had shattered from the force. He winced at the fact that his arms felt like they were on fire and staggered forwards, kicking a seat into place that had fallen from the front lobby, a couch now missing half its length. As it settled back onto its 2 left feet and the broken center resting on the shattered concrete, Nito breathed a deep sigh and the ice barrier cracked and shattered. In less than 10 seconds, he found himself facing the 7 heroes, newly ruffled from his grand hurrah. "Well, I surrender." Nito smiled, slightly manic, "though I can't quite raise my arms to gesture right now." Across from him, 7 pairs of eyes narrowed. "Damn, tough crowd." Izuku caught his breath as they finally reached far enough that heroes couldn't catch them. The tunnel network around the museum was filled in with resin bombs, and rigged tunnels collapsed behind them, traps going live. The green-haired leader looked at the purple brainwasher across the pipe from him. "Think I sold the performance?" "Yeah, very melodramatic. A villain sacrificing himself for the cause. The leader grieving the loss of a subordinate." Con Man chuckled, tossing the white and black mask of the kingpin back across the tunnel. "I think Larceny is going to be right where we want him. I gave him the rundown and he loved the plan." "Good." Izuku pulled the mask on, voice suddenly coming off far more sinister through its distortion. "I hate that we had to play this out, but it does mean we are one step closer. In fact, I would even say that we've now begun moving into the mid-game phase. HMMM. Contact base. Get teams sorted. We're going for the rush." 3 days before the exam, Itoshi and Midoriya sat at a counter. The coffee shop was open until midnight and the hour was fast approaching. He and Midoriya had talked business as it was, so the two were now simply enjoying the calm atmosphere, coffee and teacups littering the table as much as paper and pens did. Hitoshi sipped his tall dark espresso, eyes soft from their usual mania, as he looked over a few notes he had made. Hitoshi considered what was happening, how close he had become to Midoriya's master plans, and felt a rush of familiar anxiety. The words slipped out. "Why me?" Midoriya blinked, eyes widening as he sucked down another mouthful of creamy frap coffee. "In what context?" He tilted his head. "The exercise, the huge game you're playing, the plans and routes we can take. Why are you telling to me?" Hitoshi emphasized by tapping his finger on the notebook's title stage directions in the center of the table. "I'm not even in your class. Hell, we only started meeting up after the sports festival and your internship because we both suffer insomnia and prefer to be productive at ungodly hours of the night. Why make me your second, your field commander?" There is a pause, Midoriya swallowing another sip of his drink and then leaning back, arms crossed as he stared at Hitoshi. Because I trust you. I trust you to know, better than anyone else I can bring in on this, how far is too far. Midoriya looked Hitoshi dead in the eye and said, with as much honesty, purpose, and pleading as he could, I trust that if I get too into the persona of a villain, you'll snap me out of it. Not just because you're quirkin, but because I trust you will. I know that you dislike the idea of being a villain. That though you enjoy the irony of the exercise, you don't want to be a villain more than you already are accused of. So if I go too far, if I get lost in my own mind, I need someone to pull me back from the edge. There was a moment of silence and Hitoshi was in awe. But I don't have the best quirk or share classes with you. How can you trust me? All we do is come and sit and talk. We're friends, yeah, but, is what he wants to say. But the thought is cut off, a flash of memory from after the internship period. Izuku rubs his neck the same way now, and beneath the thin veneer of smiles and nervousness is true uncertainty. He's putting himself out there, trying to open up. Sure, Izuku, I'll keep you in check. That blinding smile he gets makes the anxiety he will no doubt suffer worth it. Day 1, 20 hours, 52 minutes. Microfractures all over the metacarpals in your right hand. Contusions across your entire upper body. A slight concussion and a fractured jaw. Wow, Izuku, did you have to let him hit you so hard? Mei joked, running a small scanner over his hands before she set it down. She turned to gather the antiseptic and liquid bandages from her pack. It wasn't exactly consensual, Izuku muttered, wincing as she cleaned the scrapes across his hands, eyes lidded as he ignored the pain that flared with every motion. Besides, this is within what I expected, if a bit earlier than I would have liked. Thanks to you and Momo, the accelerant serum will help with the early healing and numb the pain. Your prototype gear will let me participate in the third act. I figure most of the second day will be spent resting in preparation while we acquire the last objectives. And while you mission kill the snitch bot. He lifted his far less damaged left hand and moved to bring up his plans. A few taps of the console Mei had set up nearby and the hollow all glowed to life. I managed to snag the number 1 insignia patch from Bakugo's uniform. We got the coffin out. We also have our VIP agent, the black data laptop and the skull from the vault. That's 1, 4, 5, 12, and 13. Kuji and your camera bots confirmed 8 more objectives, Izuku mused, flicking through stills from the cameras. A jewelry store with a large gaudy diamond and a comically oversized price tag, number 7. Another high-rise. This time a server room with a computer bank, a large 10 etched on the case. A warehouse on the edge of the city blocks. A large crate marked with 14 on the side stacked among the other boxes. A radio broadcast office, set up on the western half of the city with another hostage bot, its eerily present Mike-styled attire adorned with a bright 3. The 4 of these are spread out and divided enough that the night teams can take them. Let's choose breakdown 6. Con, assault, go wake the teams. Get them some food and give them time to gear up. We plan to start at 11:45. Mei, you get watch tonight. Hitoshi will run comms. And Mezu needs rest like me. Tonight needs to be in and out. No fuck-ups, no delays. Hitoshi and Mezu nodded, already heading down to relay orders, Mezu shifting to loosen bruised muscle. As they left, Mei looked at Izuku with a gleam in her eye. Hey, Izu, do you really think Nito will pull off the act you want? Not at all. While he talks and plays haughty, he can't lie for shit. Too proud. It's why I had Hitoshi drug him to the gills. Saves him some pain from the broken arm as well. Izuku grinned, smirking at the remembered proud and expectant expression on Nito's face. He also knew that his poor savior was fine with sleeping a chunk of the night and tomorrow away. Wait, what drugs? Izuku smirked, pulling out an empty vial from his pocket, tossing it so she could see the label. The good kind. Katsuki cracked his knuckles, feeling the low burning ache through his arms and shoulders from his fight with Deku. His head wound had been shallow and sealed up with some liquid stitches with no problem. But he was technically concussed. With a ruling from Recovery Girl over the comms to check him, he was essentially removed from command for 12 hours. Also, he couldn't sleep due to the risk. So instead, here he was, sitting in bed with a warm blanket, looking over the feeds on his smart tablet. The villains had gone silent for the last few hours, and with the exception of a very quiet, smiling Monoma, they were nowhere to be found. He tabbed to a feed of Tsuburaba and Asui interrogating his prisoner, or at least trying to. Monoma had refused sedation and was currently in a cell. Asui was playing good cop, trying to coax out anything she could and asking leading questions. Meanwhile, Tsuburaba tried to get Monoma angry or annoyed. Both had been told to keep a 5-foot range, easily marked out by yellow tape, to keep him from stealing quirks. Bakugo was fucking annoyed. The whole sacrifice rubbed him the wrong way. He had never anticipated shit like this. He had expected Deku to fight tooth and nail not to lose anyone. Deku had looked surprised, damn near heartbroken, at Monoma jumping in. But something was wrong. Why didn't he try to save Monoma? He could have doubled back and saved him. The only other way was if Brain Drain had mind-washed his boss to head home. If that happened, Bakugo would have expected a dangerous level of damage to occur somewhere. It didn't add up. Hitoshi stepped down the last few steps into what at one time had been a fairly beautiful open space office, but was now home to several crates of supplies and tables where gear was spread out and being assembled. The 4 teams he was sending out tonight were getting ready. Like the rest of the rooms the villains had taken in the building, thick blackout curtains covered the slew of windows. Yosu and Sen were the team that seemed the most collected, their assets sliding into pockets and gear being tightened. Sen's armor was exposed, his long coat draped over the back of his seat as the fairly basic body armor, not much more than a vest and some arm guards, was strapped down. Then he added the equipment netting loaded with his supply of tools. His gas mask was sitting on the table, the filters fresh and ready. Beside him stood Yosu in a black tank top and cargo pants, with a courier-style pack of tools. His bandana was still there, holding his hair back, but a face mask similar to Mezu's stretched from cheekbone to collar, decorated with a massive blue smile. Yosu had taken his role as graffiti with glee and had already been planning out places for traps and ambushes through the building. The main stairwell, covered with bright red and blue X marks and tripwires, was proof of that. The elevator itself was the only safe way through the upper levels of the tower now. The other teams were setting up as well. Fumigage had his cloak spread out over the counter as he checked its wiring. His under outfit was designed with leather and buckles in mind, taking inspiration from the old movie, The Crow, with Brandon Lee and Edward Scissorhands. A leather vest covered his torso, strapped tight with multiple buckles, many of which held small bits of gear. His black jeans were buckled with a bright red belt, matching his collar, and his second black belt was slung low on one side, laden with a row of grenades. Beside him, Kiwaro had swapped his gray vest for a deep red one and was also grabbing quite a few tools and a pair of batons for combat. Beyond that, his hat had been replaced by a short black hood that stuck into the collar of his shirt. He had also added a gas mask with bright, green glowing lenses. Mina stood with Ryuko by the window. She had foregone her classic motley array of colors in exchange for an outfit that looked like black scaly joints and plates of polished black armor, adding a smooth black visor that wrapped her eyes. Her pink hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail. Her armor had also been hooked up with tubes to and from tanks mounted on her hips to store extra acids. In the end, she did indeed look like an alien queen. Her partner Ryuko, on the other hand, looked ghoulish. Her outfit, a loose school uniform in gray and black, was tattered and ripped. Her hair was covered by a black veil, giving her an appearance straight out of a horror movie. The pale, faceless white mask she favored only added to that menacing expression. Hitoshi knew from talking with Mei there were a few secrets to Ryuko's outfit, extra armor and gear stashed in its layers. The final duo was Juzu and Itsuka. Juzu picked a full suit with tails when they had asked for his preference, and had a gold tie and hat band to accentuate his off-color skin tone. He also had a long, curved hook staff with him, for ease of use. The soft-spoken teen was engaged with Itsuka in conversation, who had taken a business-casual approach. Button-up shirt and vest, long skirt that parted up the sides to her thighs for ease of movement, and a belt of pouches filled with various tools and gadgets. For several minutes Hitoshi watched, seeing them all finish setting up, zipping bags and stashing the last of the tools. With a twirl, Fumigage wrapped his cloak around his shoulders and the internal lighting turned on, bathing the depths of the cloak and hood with a deep red glow, both to keep dark shadow at bay and provide an intimidating effect. Particularly when he slipped on a cloth mask with the same tech over his head and it lit up with glowing red eyes and a smile over his avian skull. With that, Hitoshi stepped forwards and tapped a console, the white walls behind him being covered with projections. "All right, fall in ladies and gents. Izuku wanted us to strike at 11:45. I want us out and moving into position by 11:30. The faster we get this done, the faster we can set up for day 2. Nito felt his eyes focus back on his interrogators as they rattled off another line of questions. Subaraba was loud and aggressive, slamming the wall and blowing wind around. Asui was calm and focused. Honestly, even if Nito wanted to respond and fuck with them, he really couldn't. The pill that Khan had slipped him was great at numbing out the pain of shattering both his arms, but it made the world hazy. He sort of got what they were saying. Where is your base? What are your plans? Blah blah blah. Honestly, Nito couldn't care. Khan had said that it would wear off in about 16 hours and that extortion would help with his arm problem. The plan for extortion is really, really, really funny. Nito burst into giggles and his interrogators gave up. Shouta, Asui, Shizaki Ibara started, looking over the gathered heroes. Call me Tsuyu. Tsuyu, then. We're setting up patrols. You two have the console. Understood. I, Todoroki, and Uraraka are team leaders. With me are Sato and Kamakiri. Uraraka has Shiro and Tsuburaba. Todoroki has Rin and Shishida, Takage, Hagakure, and Komori. You're on base watch. Keep the place secure. In several hours the injured will start coming off bed rest and join you. One of you needs to keep watch on the prisoner, Ibara continued, checking her tablet to confirm she had everyone in the right teams. For those of you who haven't been informed, Todoroki picked up a screen behind him turning into a mugshot of Monoma and a fake rap sheet. During the museum heist the villain team began a few hours ago. We managed to capture the injured Monoma Nito. He broke both his arms channeling the Kingpin's super strength, buying time for their escape before surrendering to us. Shortly after, the system granted us access to his file. His villain alias is Larceny, and he was supposedly partnered with Yaoyorozu Momo. He is currently self-sedated, potentially as a way to keep the pain from using Kingpin's quirk at bay. As such, we cannot apply any sedatives until it clears out of his system. Interrogation proved unsuccessful. However, we believe it's possible that Kingpin will try to recover his ally sometime before day 3. Keep an eye out. With that, the heroes scattered to prep for their missions. Across the street, an earphone jack slipped back into a manhole cover. Hacker, got some news for you. Heading back to my hideout now to transmit it to the tower. Thanks, Miss Pirate Radio. Remember, get your stuff set up before noon and you can sleep the rest of the time. Good to hear. It's been a long day. PR out. 3 days before the exam. Izuku sat in Hatsume's workshop, testing out her mobile holowall setup. So like this. He made a gesture and the video feed his hand was hovering on was highlighted. Yep, that selects a feed. Then you drag to your preferred location. The other gesture is for pausing data. Cool. For a while, that was it. Occasional comments and questions before the conversation died out. Mei focused on assembling the last barrel for the big gun before she noticed something. Namely, Izuku slouching against the back wall of the counter he was sitting on. Hey, Izuku. No response. Izuku. A faint snore and Mei stepped around, looking at the dozing green-haired teen. Up close, Izuku didn't look that good. He had the bags that she would associate more with Shinsu and his face was pale. Stress. He had been active and up late if the odd midnight updates to plans were any indicator. She frowned and poked him, his head slowly tilting as he let out another light snore. Silly Kingpin, she sighed and lifted his arm, pausing at how toned it seemed. Anyway, she had a beanbag in the corner she used when she needed a sleep break from tinkering on her babies. It would be more comfortable than sleeping standing up. She got his arm around her neck and reached to grab under his knees, planning to princess carry Izuku to the beanbag. She got her grip, crouched and stood, and almost staggered because holy hell for such a small guy Izuku-kun was heavy. Careful not to wake the sleeping mastermind, Mei navigated towards the massive beanbag she had in the corner. She set Izuku down, sighing in relief at letting the weight go. She was no stranger to heavy stuff, but Izuku still weighed more than she thought. She glanced down and noticed his shirt had ridden up, exposing the reason. The little badass was pure muscle. She grinned and took a picture of his abs. Before shifting his shirt back down, she laid a fleece blanket over him to keep him warm and headed back to the hall. She had a few adjustments to do, though if she ended up with a few more pictures of the sleeping green-haired boy, well, no one had to know. Day 1, 23 hours, 44 minutes. Check-in, Mei called, looking at the holowall as she popped in her earset once more. Her eyes focused as the 8 camera feeds from the villains' masks and hats came through. Nightmare and Blackout, ready. The two were crouched in a back alley, ready to move. Hold Up and Graffiti, ready to rock. They sat underground, standing at the base of a manhole cover. Drug Runner and Lift, set and good to go. There they were, Mina making acid to top off her tanks as they looked at the street from behind a dumpster. Slight and Smuggler, eyes on the target. The two were sitting in an empty restaurant, having tunneled into the basement and already cut the alarms. Good. Go on all fronts. Keep your wits about you. Get in, get out, and get home. Base. This is Alpha, moving back down the 3rd street going south. No signs. Uraraka called in over the comms. Tsuyu nodded to herself, making notes. Roger that. Beta, Delta, update. Tsuyu murmured, marking Uraraka's current location on the map. Delta here. Moving north now, up near the west side at the moment, and we're heading back soon. That was Todoroki, marker goes there. Beta here, circling 2 blocks from the outside as usual, east side currently. And there was Shizaki, marked there. Understood. Keep in touch. Juzu yawned as, with a soft click, his neck loosened and his jaw popped, clearing the last of sleep stiffness from his body. Beside him Mitsuka, or Slight, as she went by in the field, was stretching herself, hands locked behind her back. With a slow stretch back her spine clicked, a soft sigh of pleasure and relief leaving her lips as the duo turned their gazes to the heavy metal grate between them and their prize. It's impressive. The window is alarmed to hell and back. There are cameras everywhere and if any of the glass shatters, the alarms are triggered. Even then, there's no real way to reach the case. It's reinforced and loaded with sensors. If we break it, the alarms go off, Itsuka commented, looking over the information they had on their phones. Sadly, they never expected me, or us, choosing to simply smash and grab. Juzu grinned, stepping to the side of the building closest to their target. With a tap, the wall shimmered and its texture seemed to soften. Would you be so kind, my lady slight? No problem, sir smuggler. Cupping her hand into a clawing motion and growing it to be as wide as she was, Itsuka grasped the top and slowly dragged her hand down, leaving a new entry into the building the width of her massive hand. Wonderful, let's grab and go. He smiled, stepping over the now solid pile of brick sludge. Juzu stepped quickly, ignoring the alarms that began ringing as he reached out. His hand pushed through the reinforced glass of the display with ease and pulled the gaudy, oversized diamond necklace out, sliding it into his coat to sit in a large interior pocket. Alarms going off and you got the gravity patrol heading your way. Stay off the streets. I guess we should take our leave before the heroes show up, he muttered, amused, stepping out and looking up. The building next to the jewelry store was only 3 stories. Wonderful, shall we? Itsuka nodded and turned back to the wall, with her massive hand held out. And a hop and a crouch to get ready, he jumped up as she threw him high. He hooked on the end of the cane, lashing out to catch the lip of the roof and guide his motion into a curve with a smooth landing. Spinning back around, he tightened his grip as he lowered his cane, and Itsuka leaped, a large finger catching the hook before she shrunk her hand, transitioning to a tight grip. A twist and a pull, and Slight stood on the roof beside him. We're not too far from the restaurant. Let's move, she called out, and the two rushed to the far side of the block. With luck, the heroes would never see them. Slight and Smuggler got their attention. Todoroki's moving towards the east side. Move in. Fumikage and Shihai rushed through the shadowed streets towards the warehouse. They froze and kept an eye out at every corner as they stayed on the lookout for heroes. Blackout was a wraith, the deepest, blackest of shadows coating his skin and absorbing light, leaving a surreal blank spot in the night where he moved. Behind him, the faintly glowing cloak of Takoyami looked like a demon from hell as it kept pace, red and black shifting as the tears in his cloak opened or shut with each movement. They reached the warehouse without any sign of the heroes. With steady hands, Blackout picked at the lock, Nightmare letting the tension relax as he kept watch. Within a minute, the door was opened, and they were in. They rushed through the stacks, looking for the crate they wanted. There it was. It was large and strapped to a pallet. They had a plan for moving it, but that would be reliant on Graffiti bringing the truck around. Their job was to be ready for it. We'll need the pallet jack or a forklift. I'll track one down, double-check the straps and set up for the next stage, Shihai said, and Fumikage nodded, already running hands along the straps to check the connections. They just had to hold out for pickup now. Clear. Shizaki's team just checked in and she's heading across town. Move. In the back street they had exited the sewers from, Yosu was already crouched with his hands in the guts of the pickup truck they had chosen to use. He mumbled as he reviewed the instructions May had given him, and as he twisted wires to get there. A spark. He quickly welded those wires together and let the engine spark to life, leaving it idling in the alley. Exit route is prepped. Let's get our guy. He and Sen made their way across the street and around a building to a fire escape, Sen twisting his legs before leaping the 12 feet up. It took only a few seconds for him to drop the ladder so Yosu could follow. The building they were at was only a few stories tall, but they needed to reach the top floor. That's where the recording studio would be. The two villains reached the top floor and the security door that was their entrance. So want a knock? Yosu asked, pulling a coil of wire from his bag. Sure, Sen shrugged, before shifting his stance back. His hand began to rotate, his arm twisting and shortening as the mass was repurposed. Then, with a sound not unlike a snapping cable, slamming his fist into the door, denting the metal and blowing it off its hinges. Knock knock. Kidnapping. We want to give you to our boss. It's like a violent religion, just come quietly, Yosu called out, striding in and kicking the door to the side, welding it into the wall to keep it out of the way. Isn't violent religion a redundant turn of phrase, since historically religion is fairly violent? Sen murmured distractedly, taking a gun out from the inside of his jacket and pulling back the slide to check the chamber, before turning back to the alley. SHHH, I'm bird hunting, Yosu called back, storming into the building and down a short hall, kicking through a frosted glass door. A fire alarm finally began going off. There, clumsily standing behind a desk across the open floor studio, was the target. A modified civil bot with a conical yellow hat and a leather vest. It looked like a shitty Present Mike cosplayer. Yosu snapped the wire taut between his fists, the blue painted on smile and dark eyes showing as he stomped across the room. There you are. Now hold still so this doesn't hurt. Shit, there's a second alarm. Uraraka, keep on the first alarm. Todoroki, get ready to back Uraraka up from the north if there's a fight. Shizaki, the alarm is coming from 3 blocks east and 1 north of where you are now. Hurry, sending you the marker now. Ryako held out her hand, watching it turn pale and lifeless, stuck rigidly in place, as a new spectral arm emerged from the wall and opened the door from the inside. She and her partner walked through the side door of the high-rise without setting off the alarm. Behind her, Mina grinned and looked around. That was easy. Now we just need to get to the 4th floor and plug in the uplink. Yep, let's head up. You'll need to melt a few walls. I can only open some of the doors like that. As we planned, Mina asked, already tapping her visor and seeing the overlaid blueprints through the walls. Wiring and plumbing showed up in bright red, supports in yellow. As we planned, Ryuko echoed back, striding through the building's back hallways. The two horror movie villains grinned as they headed upstairs. Uraraka leaped from building to building, short pulses of weightlessness letting her move from one vantage point to another with long, carefully timed jumps. Zero moved across the street, and between them Tsuburaba ran down it, his breathing slow and easy as the three headed for what HQ had told them was a jewelry store. She was heading up to a taller point when she saw them. Nothing much, but a flicker of change, a breaking of light from one window to another. Two figures leaping across the rooftops a half block away. Zero, Tsuburaba, I have visual contact. Here's the plan. 6 days before the exam. Uraraka glanced back across the room, seeing Deku tense slightly but keeping his eyes down as she joined the hero team. Beside her, Todoroki leaned back against the wall, eyes also locked on Izuku. Todoroki looked at Izuku with a thoughtful expression as Ida joined them, also somewhat morose at what felt like a betrayal. She looked over and shared a commiserating look with her rule-abiding friend, only to be interrupted from her thoughts. Uraraka, came the soft voice. That was not Ida. She turned to the ice and fire user. Don't pity him. What do you mean? She hissed back, a flicker of anger igniting under her skin before she noticed how tense Todoroki actually was. Don't pity Midoriya. It's not going to end well if you do, Todoroki emphasized softly, but his gaze was locked on her. I've seen that stance twice. Felt this mood before. When he stood back up and yelled at me during the festival, when he broke his already broken fingers, when he convinced me to use my fire. That was enough to shock her. She had seen Deku during that. They all had. The two fighters had been away from any microphones, and most of the cameras aimed at them had been unable to really get a good shot of Izuku's face during that fight in the arena. Todoroki had tossed ice everywhere, and Izuku's strikes had claimed their fair share of cameras. But she had seen Izuku pause and then push harder than before. What was the second time? Ida spoke up this time, a sharp-hissed word that surprised her. Hasu. The second time was in Hasu. That's when I saw it. Uraraka looked back at her friend. Everyone in the class knew something went down in Hasu. Midoriya's mysterious message, the fact they were admitted to the hospital, Ida's new scars, and the video of Stain. She knew those things meant something, but she didn't know exactly what. She swallowed, finding her throat suddenly dry, and looked back at the green-haired kid who she had saved on the first day. This time she paid more attention. Like Gunhead Sensei said, watch the body, watch the eyes, they'll give themselves away. Izuku was still, not like when he was scared. No, it looked like when he was muttering, like when he was standing and focused. But this time it wasn't about a hero or a new quirk. No, he focused on the room, on Bakugo. I wonder, what is going to happen, Izuku? As the class came to a close, Aizawa dismissed them, only calling for Izuku to stay for a moment to discuss a test. What are you going to do? Day 1, 23 hours, 54 minutes. Juzu would have been taken out in the first moment of the fight if he hadn't turned to check his 6 o'clock. As it is, he only brought his hook staff around in time to clumsily fend off a high-speed kick from a student in orange and black armor. He stumbled back and into Itsuka's side, causing her to spin around, hands already expanding. By then the attacker had kicked off, flying up and back across the roof, pulled back in a long arc to where 2 strands of tape were stuck to the rooftop. Tower, got 3 on us from above. We need an exit stat. 0, Uraraka. And Tsuburaba, Itsuka muttered. It was true. Staff raised and held to guard. Juzu could see what was going on more clearly now. 0 was floating just above the roof, the tape from his elbows anchoring him. Beside him, Tsuburaba mantled over the ledge, while Uraraka landed from a long jump, tapping her hands together as she and 0 dropped to the floor. Hello, villains. We are here to capture you. Come along quietly or get wrecked. Tsuburaba called, tensed for a fight. Hold on a minute, I gotta check something. Better make it fast. Hacker, Sen and Yosu rushed, the civil bot held by its legs and torso between them as they moved across the street. Sen glanced around and cursed. There, probably 2 blocks away and closing in fast, a snaking line of vines was coming their way. It was ridden by 3 figures as it lashed out and dragged itself forwards rapidly. Graffiti, get going. I'll slow them down. Sen dropped the legs towards Yosu, who rushed into the side street and headed for the still idling truck. At the same time, Sen pulled his handgun back out and took careful shots at the heroes. 2 blocks, almost a fourth of a kilometer in distance. The snap-hiss sound of the gun went fast as he tried to pepper the approaching heroes. Sadly, that fell apart when the vines simply shifted and curled back, granting Shizaki and her allies built-in cover before they surged forwards once more. Oh, that's not fucking fair. Sen put the gun away as he ran down the side street, the roar of the pickup signaling that it was time to go. He reached to his jacket lapel and pulled a cylinder from where it hung, yanking the pin and dropping it as he vaulted the back of the truck. He came to a stop less than a meter from the welded-to-the-wall mic bot. Go, go, go. He hammered on the cab's back wall with a boot, looking at the first tendrils of vines that came creeping along the street. Then, his grenade started spewing thick and heavy smoke into the night air, quickly blacking out the alley behind him. The Waze hit the gas, shifted gears, and with the squeal of tires on concrete, they were off. They exited with a cloud of smoke spewing after them, along with vines that crept along buildings and chased them. Oh, got him, Nit. He pulled the gun again and started taking potshots, forcing Shizaki to multitask. I know she's been putting time into growing her vines bigger and faster, but this is goddamn insane. He managed to make them stagger back, hiding behind vines a few times, but the truck was swerving slightly. Graf, keep her steady. Hack, we need a route that won't get us caught, please. Hold tight, came the call, and Sen grimaced, holding tight as the truck all but drifted and they turned south, spinning their tires and squealing as they made a wide right turn away from the borders of the district, taking them down another street. Working on it. Work faster, bitch. Yeah, okay. Yosu was pissed. Fuck. Sen grabbed another grenade, an incendiary this time, and yanked the pin, counting down from 3. Tossing flame. The bomb skidded off the street where, with a dull explosive sound, it spread a splash of flames across the street, the fuel sticking to the concrete and burning. The plants reared back. Shizaki obviously was taken off guard, before the vines shifted to climb the buildings as the 3 riders were circled up and around the flames. Floor it past the street and take the next right turn. Then go straight through the next 3 blocks. After that, the road turns back north as you pass the city center and you can hopefully juke the heroes a bit. Fine. Sen, brace. Oh, shit. The truck shuddered as it sideswiped a parked sedan, the turn down the side street going wide. Sen was gripping the truck bed walls with white fingers at the impact before the car skidded back off and continued down the street. Warning would be nice. Fuck you, Sen. Sorta busy. This is Con. I'm back and retaking comms so Hacker can do her job. Drugs, lift, keep it slow and careful. Slight, smuggler, get inside the building. The roof beneath you is clear for passage. Night, black, open the southeast side warehouse loading door, you want bay 4. Get the pallet ready to go as fast as possible at the opening. You'll have less than a minute to drop and get in. Graph and hold, keep on the course. The heroes are falling behind, which is good. But I've got some worrying movement from the Iceman to the north. Mina and Ryuko shared a glance, hearing the troubles their allies were facing. Let's hurry. They might need backup. Mina held out her hand and flexed as she spoke, the gloves that collected the acid releasing sharp hooked claws. With a flex of her wrist and hand, she swapped the pump on her suit from draining to releasing her acid. With the heavy-duty non-corrosive points exposed and dripping with alkalines, she went to work. She scored lines filled with the highly potent acid that slowly melted and corroded through the concrete and rebar wall between them and the server room. As it crumbled, she dug the claws in, pulling the decayed chunks away to let the acid eat deeper, faster. She scored through each layer quickly, Ryuko standing back to avoid the slowly spreading line of acid across the floor. The ghost girl poured a neutralizing compound across them with the help of a phantom limb. From testing on another building, they knew this would take almost 10 minutes. The schematics showed there weren't sensors or alarms in the server room, only the rooms and offices leading into it. Uraraka was pulled back by Ciro's tape once more, the coil around her hand helping as she pulled free of the sudden quicksand that the floor became. Across from them stood Itsuka and Juzu, breathing heavily as they looked ready to fight. The combat had been hectic, the heroes avoiding the rooftop itself as best they could, since the surface shifted back and forth from stone and concrete to a consistency resembling tar. The villains in return were much more elusive, avoiding Uraraka's hands or Ciro's tape. Tsuburaba had taken a few potshots but was far more concerned with giving his team a place to step or thing to grab so they could stay free to move. Slight, I believe it's time for us to step down, Juzu called, slamming his foot down and setting his staff at the ready. A moment later, and he had shifted a much larger radius around him to a tar-like consistency, the heroes leaping back. Itsuka stepped close as she pulled a simple mouth and nose mask from her jacket, pressing it on to seal with a hiss. Uraraka had but a second to realize what their plan was before she was lunging in low gravity, trying to clear the gap in a last-ditch attack. She was stopped though, Juzu swinging up the bottom of the hooked cane to slam into her, throwing her back and up for a minute as the two villains dropped through the roof, sinking through a sudden hole of liquid. Shit, in we go, Tsuburaba muttered before blowing a platform of air for Uraraka to land on as the surface of the roof solidified once more. This is going to be a nightmare, Ciro muttered, flexing as he readied himself. Yosu gritted his teeth, hand gripping the gearshift tight and body leaning into the foot on the gas pedal. He popped the clutch and swapped to a higher gear, palming the wheel as he steadied his course again, avoiding one more reaching vine that tried to engage and slow the sideswipe the truck made from a side alley. Honestly, he knew Shiozaki had been training, but normally to get her quirk going like this she needed an open field or somewhere to grow and strengthen. Fuck. Con, is there a city park around here? There's a corner park a block north and 2 closer to the center of the district. Con confirms his suspicions and Yosu guns it, counting down the distance. Another creeping vine crawling from an alley on the north side of the street gets flattened, but not before taking off his right side mirror. It's there. Her vines are coming from there. Well shit. You need to go right past it unless you want to be close enough to the hero agency for it to send back up, Con responded, voice sharp. Good. Reaching back, Yosu reached down and grabbed his gun from his belt before he slammed the butt of the weapon through the rear window of the cab, shattered tempered glass raining down across the seat next to him. Sen, I got a plan. What do you need? Your firebombs. 3 days before the exam. They finished her final check on the equipment. Before her, 12 metal briefcases were opened and lined up, their contents on display. Red goo, flame, concussive, flash, smoke, tear gas. She checked off her list. Izuku had requested these and they were easy enough. Most of the designs had even been pre-made. A bit of editing to remove as much spare material as they could feasibly get away with was done, particularly once she had Momo and Nito produce the casing. Speaking of the miracle matter makers, the two had headed to lunch, planning to gorge themselves to make up for lost calories and fat reserves. They took her time closing up and locking the cases. After Izuku's earlier visit and subsequent nap, she had finished most of the materials for the exercise. She packed the briefcases in a crate and looked over the back of the trucks in her lab. 2 were filled with stacks of organized cases and crates, all small enough to fit in the eventual bases and travel through the sewers. She had RG guns and ammo, demolition charges, the hollow-all, comms and computers, and personalized suits of gear, all personally designed to make the villains stylish and dangerous. And much, much more. The one with the mount for her baby was particularly exciting, and there were a few crates prepped there as well. But she had 2 more projects that Izuku hadn't seen yet. They stashed the grenade crates in the trucks and then wandered to the back of her lab, pulling the half-completed projects from where they sat, hidden in plain sight. She had her personal equipment almost ready, the partial exoskeleton finished and the armor close to completion. But for Izuku, well, his gear was still only going to be a prototype and that's all she could give him. But she was sure he would make it work, despite the time limit it would have. She heard the door to the lab open, Nito's softly accented voice chatting about basic weapon designs with a cheerful Momo. They blocked them out for a moment. She had 3 days, and aside from finishing with her personal projects, there was one more thing she wanted to do. The trucks were nice, but Izuku had a point. Style and impact were important. She pulled up the requisitions form and the catalog of cars already placed in the city and tabbed through it, selecting a town car for getting in early. But she needed the right car, something Izuku would like. Tomorrow, any of the villains who couldn't already drive were learning the basics of driving anyway, Yosu planning to walk them through it. Since Mei could drive, she decided that she would use the spare time to get started. What I need is something fast. She paused, looking at the pictures on her screen, before grinning. It wasn't what she expected and Izuku would need to take an extra class to learn it. Perfect. Day 2, 0 hours, 2 minutes. I hate this plan, Sen muttered, slowly twisting his legs as he focused on the trailing Shiozaki. He would only really get one shot at this. So do I, but let's do it. Be safe. Yosu returned, eyeing the next block and where he had to go. Ibara pushed harder, growing her vines faster and larger. After her humiliating defeat in the sports festival, she was going to prove herself. Before her team's patrol, she had spent the better part of an hour at one of the only plots of plant life in the city, growing the infrastructure to make her vines longer and stronger. Then these two showed up. Kaibara and Awase, better known as the class jokers. Awase was rude and uncouth, constantly vulgar as he taunted and insulted his opponents. While far calmer, Kaibara was disrespectful and apathetic towards those around him, not to mention openly heretical, as evidenced by several very loud, very pointed debates he had started with her. Both had mocked her Christian leanings in their own ways, and she had no plans to let them escape her grasp during this exercise. She focused, the closing distance back to the park making her vines grow stronger as she pushed herself faster and farther. Sen brought up his gun again and with a newly practiced motion, a swift weaving of vines flowed before her and her companion. But the thud and splatter of the bullets never came. Instead, a hissing sound reached her. She glanced up, the vines loosening to let her see, only for Kaibara to go crashing through, kicking her back with a surprised gasp as his boots made contact through the vines. His gas mask shone with blue baleful eyes, gazing through the dark of the night. In each hand was a pair of pulled grenades, smoke pouring out and wreathing him like a demon of hell and brimstone. One was deep black and thick, the other a noxious green-blue glowing in the streetlights, the scent of it making her tear up and choke. Tear gas of some sort. No. She shoved him back, trying to get him away, but he simply dropped the grenades, making her gasp and stagger as the vines pulled her and her allies back. In the corner of her eye, she could see Kamakiri swipe his hand, a blade growing from his arm to swipe the grenade's smoke clear. From above the path of the blade, Kaibara leaped in once more, body twisted and contorted as he used his strange quirk. He leapt off one vine to another and then shoulder-checked Sado, the sugar eater, grunting and stumbling back as he reached for a dose of sugar. With a twisting motion, Kaibara was behind him and pulling his gun, placing it against the underside of Sado's head, keeping his jaw closed and pointing a second gun at Kamakiri and Ibara. Catching themselves, both heroes froze, glancing at each other and tensing. Now, let's hold up and relax a minute or you may just lose another teammate. Mina pointed a fist at the remains of the wall where they sizzled on the floor. With a hiss, the back of her gauntlet released a faint spray that seemed to congeal and solidify the mess. With that done, Ryuko stepped past carefully and plugged the wireless connector May had given her into the server that sat blinking in the room. Connection in. Heading out now. Understood. Head to provide potential support to Slight and Smuggler. Moving to the West District now. The two girls trooped back down the stairwell. Ryuko's arms went pale, letting her quickly pass from floor to floor by oversized glowing blue translucent arms, while Ashido slid down the stairwell on a stream of acid. Zero Hanta crouched under the spinning staff of Honuki Juzu. Leaping off another desk in the office he and the skeletal villain were stuck in. The sounds of thuds and Uraraka and Tsuburaba's cursing echoed as they fought with Kendo on the other side of the room. Uraraka had tried using her quirk, but zero gravity and giant fists had been a bad experience, so she had swapped to relying on Gunhead's training. Tsuburaba had tried to get a few shots in, popping shields or blowing spears of air, but Kendo was more than strong enough to shatter his air constructs. The floor around Honuki shifted and melted once more. The desk Hanta was standing on shifting as the villain lunged, staff spinning around for another strike. Hanta had managed to stick him with tape a few times, but Honuki simply softened and then ripped the bands apart. He had resorted to this game of keep away and tossing bits of furniture at Honuki in the hopes to knock him off guard. Hanta's tape yanked him towards the ceiling and at Honuki as the staff passed beneath him before the swinging hook came around and caught his knees, yelping as he was twisted and all but thrown across the room. Hanta came rolling up on his feet, only for Honuki to kick a broken chair at the tape hero's face. Hanta brought his arms up to block the impact, only for Honuki to kick him back into the ground. Hanta tried to push himself up when the ground beneath him seemed to shift and give and his hands went through the now soft floor. Team Gamma is awake and soon to head inbound. Team Delta is moving southeast to support Beta. Keep them there and off guard. Rolling his eyes, Hanta grunted and pulled his hands out of the soft floor before it could harden, leaping up and at Honuki once more, only for a weightless Uraraka to be sent crashing into him from behind. Honuki leapt back, skipping as he ran a hand along the ceiling, making the roof sag in and droop like taffy, long lines of material hardening between the two of them and him. Easier said than done. HQ, Tsuburaba called back over the comms, just before Kendo closed in and smashed him back and out of the office, into the halls. Todoroki and his brute squad are heading southeast. Hold up and Graffiti, you have maybe a few minutes to get clear. Nightmare, be ready to support once the truck gets to you. Yosu grinned and hit the brakes, the truck's getting to a stop. With Sen distracting the team, Shizaki had let up on her control, which meant that the park was open. The patch of green had overgrown, massive twisting vines stretching out of the ground and across the street and buildings around it. Larger vines grew as tall as adult trees, trailing off in Shizaki's direction. Slamming the door open, Yosu hefted the 4 fused-together flame grenades he got from Sen. With a solid pull, he ripped the cord fuse through the pins. 3. He cocked his hand back, holding the bundle from the end of the cord. The other end fused with the bundle itself. The 4 pins jingled from where they stayed on the line. 2. With a final spin for speed, he let it fly above the park, the entire unstable hunk of explosives wobbling and twisting as it went high. Burn, bitch. Then there was fire. Like a spinning top, waves of the flaming chemical compound splashed out of the fused grenades, scattering across the center of the park as the burning bundle hit the ground. Grinning to himself, Yosu watched as the vines, barely sustainable by Shizaki with the resources of the park, went up like dry kindling. Running to the truck, Yosu popped back in the driver's seat. Sen, coming back now. Bitch's park is burning, so I give her 30 seconds before exhaustion or panic kicks in. So, Shizaki, I'm quite amazed you got your vines so large. You used a park or something, yeah, she growled, vines thrashing around her as she and Kamakiri stepped in different directions, trying to flank Kaibara. Sado was growling lowly, still stuck with the gun pressed on his chin. I did. By nature's grace, me and my vines have grown strong. Sen listened, the faint roar of the engine revving as it came back. He spoke up to cover the sound, laughing. Really, I wonder, how does fire affect your Garden of Eden? He glanced between and behind the two of them pointedly and Shizaki gasped, turning. Across several blocks, the faint glow of the wildfire that Awais had started was already visible in the night. The truck came back drifting in a wide curve out of a side street, so the back of the truck faced the standoff. Sen took advantage of everyone looking away. He pulled the triggers. Sato roared in pain, his neck and lower jaw turning red. Shizaki shrieked, 4 red patches appearing with wet thumps across her back. However, Kamakiri, when Sen tried for the triple, simply lashed out. The red splashes blasted away with crisscrossing slashes of blades. Sen turned and ran, spinning with his quirk to dodge a razor-sharp blade from a suddenly very spiky and very angry-looking Kamakiri, who charged after him. He was getting closer, and Sen was stuck dodging the rapid-fire slashes and piercing lunges, darting past them even as they gave him almost no free room to maneuver. He got clipped, the tip of a blade carving across the face of his body armor and leaving Sen spinning off balance as Kamakiri reached for him when a rapid hiss-click sound echoed. The hero was now coated with several splotches of red across his side and face. The incredulous-looking hero jerked his head to the side, Sen following suit. There was Yosu leaning out of his broken passenger window. An SMG variant of the RG gun still pointed at the hero. "Get in, fucker, we're going shopping." With a laugh at the mangled quote, Sen waved at the now-killed hero team, before leaping to the truck and swinging into the bed once more. "See ya, bitches. Good time playing with you." With a sigh, the 3 dead heroes sat and waited. In their ears, they could hear Ectoplasm saying he would have a clone there in a minute to escort them back to the observer station, and that there were rooms they could sit and wait in if they wished. They couldn't even call up the base with an update since they were all considered dead and automatically locked out of the hero comms. "Shit, I just lost Beta. Delta, hurry to intercept." Todoroki breathed deep, his team sliding alongside him on an iced overpath over the roofs as he closed in on his target. He had known from the first day that this would not be an easy fight, but even he had not been ready to face Midoriya as the Kingpin. Regardless, to succeed they needed to begin taking out Midoriya's allies. If they were so dangerous that he needed to do it himself, then he would. 2 days before the exam, Izuku watched the speeding truck as it raced around the lot. Finding out that UA had a closed racing track was a surprise, but May explained it was part of the 3rd-year curriculum for dealing with vehicles and, for the support class, a place to test vehicle designs. Izuku could name a dozen famous heroes with vehicles: Gearhead, Rotoscope, Drift King, and more. Having a driving class makes sense. As it was, 4 of the villains had proven to be skilled drivers in some way or another. Yosu was the best, with experience with trucks and vans from his family job. Behind him in the ranks were May, who had tested a few vehicles, Momo, who learned a few months ago, and interestingly enough, Izuku himself. Honestly, it wasn't like it was hard, just spatial awareness, reflexes, and memorization. It was actually quite relaxing. After spending the past few days drilling combo attacks and basic strategies, this was a good chance to rest and unwind. Though May did mention teaching him a different control layout, he bet it had to do with the new project she was working on yesterday. All he knew was that it was coming along fast, using a lot of the pre-made parts she had access to, and Momo and Nito were helping her. Day 2, 0 hours, 21 minutes. The truck roared down the street and only slowed at the last moment, skidding as it went around a far corner and down a side street. Finally, after a running battle, it pulled into a short driveway to a tall warehouse at the corner of the fake city. The truck pulled into the lot and took a sharp turn, fishtailing as it turned around and pulled up beside an open loading dock and braking. "You're late," came the terse voice of Takoyami Fumikage, stepping into sight. With the red glow etching his outfit, he appeared ethereal, menacing and demonic all the same time. Behind him, Kiriwaru Shihai moved forwards in a forklift, lowering a pallet with a thick wooden crate onto the back of the truck. Through the shattered rear window, Yosu leaned out and touched both the pallet and the truck bed, the faint hiss of them fusing reaching their ears as the 2 other villains stepped into the truck. "Sorry, Vine problem," Sen muttered, finally taking a moment to reload and check his guns. "So we heard," Shihai's voice, dry and rough, confirmed. "Let's go, we have unwanted friends coming our way." Yosu needed no further prompting. With sharp motions, he popped the clutch, slammed the gas, and let the brakes go. With a squeal, the truck shot off, the 3 passengers in the back holding the cabin and sides as the truck sped up. Fuck, incoming on the true. That's when the massive glacier formed and blocked off the road they were heading for. 20 minutes and 5 floors of melting, twisted combat in a 7-story building later, and the fight was still not over. Each floor they had passed through got destroyed thoroughly before the villains escaped, taking the stairs or simply falling through a floor like liquid as they evaded capture. Thank God for Gunhead Sensei's insane training regimen. The heroes were running ragged and the villains weren't doing much better. The 3 heroes stood staring past a twisted and distorted corridor, into 2 massive handfuls of brick pulled from the walls of the hallway and smashed into a half-formed wall between the heroes and the villains. At some point Honuki Juzu had lost his staff and hat, now looking worn down, sporting quite the bruise across his temple from a lucky hit by Tsuburaba. Kendo Itsuku looked far worse. Her arms black and red, dark purple bruises already forming up to her shoulders and her hands all colored in purple. Alpha, Gamma is coming in now. Uraraka couldn't help but grin as she heard the good news of her backup coming in. Her opponents tensed as they readied to fight once more. Why, watch out for the acid. Ajiro frowned as he looked at the two girls who had intercepted his team. With a quick motion, he held his two allies, both hard-headed as could be, back from running into a trap, a rooftop layered with pools of acid. The corrosion weak enough to not kill, but more than strong enough to weaken the roof to the consistency of something like styrofoam. Across the stretch of the decayed and corroded roof were the two most disturbing villains he had seen yet, Alien Queen and Poltergeist. I hate horror movies, Anjiro muttered, and then he was busy dodging acid and spectral limbs. Intercept successful. Horrors on the roof of the exit with the company. Get ready. Juzu felt elation. They could finally stop delaying for the others. The original plan had been to simply escape, but with the eyes on them, Khan and Hacker had suggested they fight, drawing it out as long as possible. Now, with their reinforcements here and ready to exit, he tapped into the reserve he had been holding on to, pulling as much power and range from his quirk as he could. With that in mind, he smiled and touched the ground. A contact lens in his left eye whirred to life, turning his gaze red as it highlighted the densest materials around him, including the building support beams. Foundational, he called out, making the heroes tense and look worried. He knew his bright red eye would freak them out. The lens cost him some depth perception, but it made the entire eye, from sclera to pupils, turn a uniform red. Beyond that, calling out attacks was childish, but it was something that grabbed attention. What the heroes had failed to notice was that they had led the fight so that they were against the back half of the building, the half that was but a short alley from the neighboring building, one which had a convenient entrance to the sewers in its basement. Quite convenient, but crossing the alley would be suicide with enemies like this team of heroes. Instead, let's make the alley disappear. As his power encroached into the building and took root, he smiled. It strained slightly as he selected and reached up and around him, as well as below. Collapse. Just like that, yet another building became a casualty. Around the hall, in front of his so helpful defense, the walls and ceiling sagged and began to stretch, the floor tilting and separating as it snapped and the weight took hold. The rest of the building shuddered as well, key supports twisting and making the heroes yelp, the building seemingly sinking in on itself. As the lower floors of the back third of the building sagged and sunk back into the alley, Itsuku reached out, her hands growing as she punched out through the back wall and into the wall of the building behind them. Shadow stood atop the 30-foot-tall glacier, ice in his right side steaming away as a small flame flickered across him. Surrender or fall, he called, voice sharp as the four people in the truck looked at him. He watched them glance at another and then back at Shadow. He doubted they would surrender, but protocol needed to be maintained. He was right. A squeal of tires on asphalt, and the truck began to reverse away at high speed, swerving slightly as it backed up, which is why he had his team ready themselves at the far end of the street. With a surge of cold through his side, he readied another glacial blast. He would be the anvil for his team. Then he flinched, prematurely drawing a wall of ice before him as it spattered with several red spots. Of course, those paint guns. With a wave of his hand, he sent a wide curved slope of ice down towards the truck, intending to freeze it in place. The truck seemed to slow its reverse, the sound of wheels spinning and squealing against the street echoing as it came to a stop and then charged at the glacier. A wave of black energy lashed out and shattered the still-forming wave of ice. The energy and shadow took form, a massive bird-like shape, consisting of static and shadow. It crashed into his glacier, sending him falling back as the mountain of ice shattered. Shit, Takoyami. And it's just past midnight. Twisting around, fire and ice at his fingertips, Todoroki prepared for a fight like none he had never faced. Mina and Ryuko danced back across the rooftop from the heroic bulldozers that were trying to move across the roof, led by Ajiro and his impeccable sense of balance. Mina sprayed acid on safe paths, and Ryuko spawned arms to try and pull them off balance while keeping them off guard. The villains knew where it was safe to stand, Mina's visor highlighting stable supports even as the roof began collapsing. Most of the damage was on the west side of the building, the location where the neighboring building had all but fallen apart, already caving in, all thanks to Juzu. Slight and Smuggler are in the building, get to the ground floor. Hitoshi's voice was welcomed as it confirmed that the plans had worked. With the four of them, they could solidly block off the tunnels long enough to vanish into the system and cover their tracks. See ya, boys, Mina called, already identifying a weakened point that would lead to the ground floor. Leaping, she hit it feet first, hands and arms braced out to the side to clear the entrance as Ryuko moved with quick steps and a twist, falling after her partner with a pair of raised middle fingers. Mina led the two through the already acid-covered floors, past places where the ceiling was sagging to the point of collapse and down a stairwell to the ground floor. They busted out on the first floor to see a limping smuggler and a dust-covered slide. "Let's go." Drug runner, acid in the room. Done and done. Turning back as the three fled through another door, she pumped her most vicious and potent acids across the ground floor. Normally she wouldn't be able to output this much, but she had spent most of the last 3 days draining her strongest acids into maze storage, and then letting the mad engineer distill them. Acid sprayed out from pressurized vents across her hand and arms in a mist. The room, a bakery of some sort, was left hissing behind them, the metal appliances already sinking and decaying as a warning. They filed down the narrow concrete-walled stairs to the basement, where a sewer grate sat. Leaving Smuggler to rest, Drug Runner took the point here, grasping each edge of the grate and leaving it hissing as Itsuka stepped up and threw a 3-foot-tall right hook, blowing the now weak gate off its hinges. With that, the two teams vanished, leaving behind a chunk of pulled-apart stone forming a wall of interlocking stone arms. After all, Ryuko was known as Lift for a reason, even if she hadn't shown it yet. Falling, Shadow twisted, bringing fire to life as the Shadow familiar crashed into him once more, making the dark bird destabilize from its attack. Todoroki landed and was already pushing off down the road south. His ice formed a ramp beneath his feet, letting him skate through the street as he tried to catch up, but the gap was growing only larger as the truck picked up speed. He saw the guns come up once more. He skidded and swerved, pulling pillars of ice up ahead of him to block the shots, only for the now recovered familiar to crash through them once more. For 3 blocks, he and the villains had been in this chase of stop and go, him making the truck skid by icing the road, only to have to defend himself as they escaped his traps. He was losing and he knew why. His fire. Right now, despite his resolve to use both sides of his quirk, he was unpracticed with his fire and with swapping or combining the two. Aside from overwhelming force like at the sports festival, he was open and clumsy when trying to use both abilities, and they weren't giving him time to prepare a stronger attack. Either Dark Shadow or the guns kept him from building up power. The ice was wasted building cover from the guns, and the familiar was only slightly weakened by the glow of his fur. His internal dilemma was cut off as 2 cylinders were tossed into the field of shattered ice that he was passing through. His eyes widened and he reflexively covered himself in a half-dome of ice. A smart move, as the 2 concussive explosions shattered the crystalline structures and cracked his defense. He burst free in anger and focus, rushing forward, just in time for him to meet a flashbang less than a meter in front of him. 3 minutes later, when Shadow could finally see and stand once more, with Shishida and Rin at his side, the truck and its cargo were gone. 3 days before the exam. Sparring in surprise. More sparring. For 3 days now, the hour of class time scheduled by the teachers for the teams to get ready for the exercise, which replaced foundational heroics, was filled with sparring. 1-on-1, 2-on-2, teams of 3 or 4, all backed by the constant litany of swears and insults from their illustrious leader, Bakugo Katsuki. God, the teachers made the wrong choice, was their constant thought. Looking around, they can see others with the same thought on their faces. Their leader was going to burn them out before they even reached the exercise. He stayed for this 1 hour and then headed home after school. That was it. Aside from his rants that they were all morons and extras and that he would rip apart the Kingpin himself. No teamwork, no sense of companionship or trust. It was maddening. It was middle school politics all over again. "So, you want to defect, right?" mused Izuku, sitting at a desk in some conference room he had acquired the use of. In the corner of the room, 2 other guys hung out, the first with spiky purple hair, the other was Monoma. "Yes, our leader's a goddamn madman and it's going to tear us apart. I want to be on the winning team." They scowled, sipping at their full glass of water. A grin, soft and relaxed. "Yeah, that's Kaken, I guess. But you're sure about wanting to be a villain?" Now the grin was sharper, more focused on them. "I can't guarantee it will work, you know. If Kaken finds out, you'll be taken out and I can't have you defect until the exam." He leaned forwards, body language open and inviting. "I'm dead serious." A pause. Then, one last test. "Sit here and let Shinsu ask you a few questions. You'll black out for a moment, but don't worry. I'll explain later." "Okay." They wondered what Shinsu's power was, some sort of truth. All of a sudden they blinked and Shinsu was leaning back from across the desk with a satisfied grin. In front of them, the glass was empty and the clock was missing almost 10 minutes. "Well then," Izuku grins from over the purple-haired boy's shoulder, smile wide and genuine and filled with joy. "Welcome to the team, Extortion." They couldn't help but smile. Day 2 to 6 hours, 2 minutes. It was quiet. 5 hours of no activity. No alarms, no sudden explosions or charging villains. After their vanishing act the night before, there was nothing. The best they had was finding the truck, still idling, in a parking garage on the other side of the city. An hour before dawn would color the sky over the false city, Bakugo Katsuki's alarm went off, snapping him away from his silent vigil and the screen he had been studying. With a growl, he tore the sheets off his cot and headed out to get ready for the day. He reached for his freshly clean costume and looked at his last gauntlet. With a sigh, he left it behind and hit the showers. Without its twin, it would merely put him off balance. It was time to get ready, then. It was time to take the initiative. Enough of this waiting bullshit. Izuku leaned back as he looked over the various objectives they had acquired, laid out on tables on an unused floor of the tower. The two hostages were both strapped to a table. The coffin, lined with fake jewels, stood upright beside them. The table pass that had the laptop, a printed copy of a top-secret document May hacked out of the server last night, the gold and silver UA emblem he had ripped from Bakugo's outfit, an open safety deposit box with a fake gold bar, and beside it a fake diamond necklace. To the side was the open crate from the warehouse, with aluminum model guns sitting in rows, 9 of 15. Behind him on a broad expanse of white wall, he wrote out the other 5 he knew of. Kill the snitch, steal the icon memorial from the heroes, break into the penthouse, Lab 12. Office executive briefcase. He tapped the board gently before writing in a personal objective. Spy games. A few minutes of contemplation and he had his plan. For the morning, anyway. Briefcase. Hitoshi, Yuga, Momo, Kyoyuka. Lab, Mei, Mina, Mezu, Ryuko. The rest would have to wait, though. Spy games would need to be resolved before the day was over. He needed extortion taken care of and Nito back before tomorrow, especially since he needed what the blonde copycat would have by tonight. Extortion's impact was also important, both from a practical perspective and a moral standpoint. Today is the hard one. Most of our momentum was lost, but we still have stealth. We need to focus. No fuck-ups. No heavy fighting. In and out. Tomorrow is the fighting. Today is for completing our jobs. Surprise is lost. The heroes are on edge and ready to react, but that will cause stress. We have to keep the pressure on, keep them tense. I need them all worn and tired for tomorrow to work. Izuku muttered as the markers he held flashed across the wall, swapping colors and stashing the spare ones behind his ear and in his pockets. May's holoscreen was very nice, and for monitoring their missions and watching over the city, it was invaluable. But this was planning, and for that, it was better to use the physical medium. Bright green ink and black lines on white paint. Rough plans, variations on the ones his team had been driven to read. The notes and references he had sent to all of his team over the group chat. It all needed to be brought to life. He sketched rough layouts and lists, connecting quirk details from each member of the teams with the results of a week of practicing and questions. Kyoyuka amplifies Hitoshi. Momo can make mirrors or backup belts for Yuga's lasers. Mei's hack should make Hitoshi the best spokesperson for the job. This was his preferred state. It was familiar. Debates about hero fights had been a source of entertainment, even before middle school, even after becoming part of the hero society he admired. He still kept an eye on the forums in his much reduced free time. Mei knows her way around labs and can supply Mezu with the tools needed. Ryuko can bypass the security as long as she can see inside the rooms, and most of the lab floors have an observation room. Mina is the quick way through the doors, and with Mei on site, the alarms shouldn't be a problem. After almost an hour, he tossed his third empty marker down and stepped back. The white wall covered in details about his plans. A dozen branching paths of potential problems covered half of the wall. All right, there we are. One last glance and he was ready. Reaching up, he tapped the communicator in his ear. All right, everyone, to the vault. Briefing time. The volley of responses was comforting. His teams were ready. Now to put the plans into play. The sun was peeking over the wall circling the fake city, revealing dark clouds and heavy mist across the landscape. Below the streets of the war, a cloaked form walked among the dark tunnels. His face was concealed by an ornate mask, eyes hidden behind amber glass and red light, letting him see in the pitch dark of his domain. Izuku had spoken to him yesterday, brought up the possibilities, had talked at length about who it would and could be, about the reasons why they would come. And so he prepared. He paced the tunnels, checking each trap he had been given, adjusting each access point and reviewing the tunnel layouts. Along with him, his army marches. The rats and squirrels, the snakes and lizards, even the insects. They spread through the maze around him, taking up posts, preparing to ambush unlucky travelers, to defend their newfound home. Above him, the first drops of heavy rain splashed against the cool stone. The rain changed his terrain but meant little in the long run. As the figure stepped out into one of the 3 cisterns in the city, the faint light from the grates above showed his form. A ragged brown and black cloak covered broad shoulders. Armor showed through the rips, made to look like bone and chitin. 2 long, curved horns reached from his hood. As he looked up, the light illuminated a black and gray mask shaped to look like an old weathered man, and red and amber eyes caught the light. In his domain, the animal of the villains readied for his part in the war. Shadow stood at the back of the assembled hero team. He was disgruntled. He had come close to taking out the villains the night before. He had held the truck and its combatants. He had avoided going all out. He knew this. Was it because he underestimated them? He knew the villains were a threat. He knew that. Midoriya. He was so focused on the threat of Midoriya, of the boy he knew had willingly hunted down and faced the hero killer, the boy who had dueled him and broken limbs to get him to realize his flawed logic. He had all but dismissed the rest of the villains. That was his weakness. That was why he lost the fight the night before. Clenching his left hand into a fist, faint flickers of fire curled around his hand. Not again. From now on he treats them with the respect, the focus they deserve. He looked up, Bakugo coming in, dressed in his black and red gear. Only now did he notice the blue patch, Bakugo's badge, that once adorned his collar, was missing. The one that had the UA emblem on it. The only badge that had it. It was the emblem with a bright and bold one in the center. Just like the coffin that the villains had in the security videos. Like the crate in the truck. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. Objectives, he muttered as the meeting started. He would tell Bakugo after the meeting, get descriptions of the other things the heroes had seen. If he was right, that would give them a way to find the other objectives. It would give them a chance to prepare. As the early morning rain began to pour down in earnest on the fake city, the villains moved into position. The formal wear that had been damaged was ditched, replaced by jackets and armor. Weapons, hidden during the first day, had been readied and prepared. Used gear was replenished, damaged tools repaired. A team of 4 raced through the tunnels of the sewers, ignoring and ignored by the army that rested there. They were known to the residents, after all. To the south stood a laboratory where a vial was waiting for them. Hatsume led the way, her team resting with her on a simple wheeled platform that raced through the tunnels. Mina, armor still untouched by combat, containers of acids and neutralizers freshly replenished, crouched at the front, visor glowing slightly as she kept an eye out for any surprises. She would be their way in, melting through the grates in the sewers of the lab. To the back, a crouching Shoji Mezu rested, mask pulled up and tight, broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the occasional drop of water that fell on the group. His shirt, damaged in the fighting the day before, had been replaced with a spare. His coat was still intact, made of sterner stuff. In front of him, dressed in a slightly thicker outfit, including a ragged black jacket, was Ryoko, her hands fiddling with an RG-13 handgun as she performed the last check, trying to soothe her nerves. Mei stood in the center. Her dress had been replaced by a far more sensible pair of black cargo pants and a tight black turtleneck. She also had an armored jacket decorated with the same pink scale pattern as her dress, and a fluffy pink collar. Her face was covered by the same gas mask she wore the day before. At her side was a bag with a laptop ready to use. Across her back was a long black case. Remember, what we want is on the 14th floor out of 20. No one can fuck up and set off the alarm. Not until I hack the security anyway. If we do, then it's a repeat of the museum clusterfuck. The rest nodded, and the platform took a turn before slowing. All right, everyone. We're here. 4 figures stood inside an apartment with sewer access, adjusting suits and outfits for the last time. In the lead, with his green vest and white shirt replaced for a much brighter pastel purple and deep black combination, Hitoshi ran a hand through his now slicked back hair and looked around. With sunglasses on and his outfit immaculate, he looked 1 part Yakuza, 1 part lawyer. Behind him, his team mimicked his style. Momo stood in a blue skirt and white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up and suitcase in hand, hair pulled back in a simple bun and slim glasses accentuating her look. Yuga stood in a sharp-cut suit, jacket buttoned up to conceal the focusing belt under it and hair parted in his usual style. The 4th member of their team, Kyoyuka, looked the most uncomfortable. Her black and white suit was clearly something she didn't like and wasn't used to wearing. And her hair was pinned back in a smart and short style that she kept reaching up to fiddle with, only for Momo to tap her hand away. She was carrying a purse and a suitcase as well. The 4 were ready. All right, remember the plan. I lead. The hack will emulate my power to the bots. But if we act suspicious, it will still trigger their security routines. Remember, we're here for a business deal. We are calm, collected professionals. And if anything goes wrong after we get the case, we have Yuga blow out the window and we take the express out. That drew slight smiles. Let's go. With one last adjustment to his tie, he stepped into the street, umbrella coming up to block the rain. The others followed suit as the 4 crossed the road, heading straight for the skyscraper in front of them. The cameras were looped. The bots were hacked. It was a good day to be a villain. 5 days before the exam, Izuku stood at the whiteboard in front of the conference room, markers dancing across it as the rest of the villain team slowly filtered in. The board was already filled with markings, names connected by colored lines. Circled groups were marked against each other, abilities and known skills listed. His notebook sat on a table in the corner. Monoma was the first to talk. So, Kingpin, what does our wonderful Class 1 leader want to do? There was a pause. Izuku set the marker down, sighing. He stepped back and half-turned, looking at Monoma dead in the eyes. Today, we develop our playbook. Izuku put his hands in his pockets and looked over the rest of the room. I don't have enough information to say how the exercise will go. I have assumptions. I have expectations. I have rough statistics. He looked back at the board. Monoma, a question for you. What, could you, one-on-one, beat Ada? Of course, I'm 1B Ico. What about Tsunotori? You and she are friends, right? Could you beat her? Anjiro, Shishida. How about Bondo? Or Shizaki? I mean, they're all mutation types, right? You can't copy them. Are you saying you're a match for them without a quirk? Monoma sat back, face twisted unpleasantly. What about with Kendo at your side? Or me? Uwais, Kaibara. Izuku looked back. Cause that's what we are doing. He flipped the board over, revealing a 17 by 25 grid. We are going to go through it, and I am honestly going to ask, if you had to fight this person, would you win? He pointed at the hero names along the top of the board. And you will answer yes, no, or maybe. Why? That was Kaibara this time, eyes narrowing. Because we can't afford to lose. We're going to make this, and I'll edit it as we go, coming up with plans and solutions for the heroes. In the end, I want you to know exactly who you can beat. We are the villains. We have to pick our fights. Pick off the heroes one by one. But if you are going to lose, don't bother fighting. Run, evade, regroup for another run. This sheet will be your guidebook. There was a beat of silence. Who wants to go first?